This handsome young man possesses the superpower to understand the inner thoughts of other living creatures. However, he lives a difficult and bleak life in his own home with his blood relatives. Since he was a child, he has been considered a cursed being and was brutally beaten. To keep him alive, his mother locked him in the attic all year round, with no contact with anyone. But today, early in the morning, his eldest brother Terios kicked open the attic door to wake him up. He looked dapper and neat, a stark contrast to his younger brother's ragged and filthy appearance. The reason Terios woke Esto up so early was because today is the coming-of-age ceremony. Esto crawled down from the attic to find everyone already prepared. His older sister, Rosit, openly showed her disgust for Esto because he was smelly and ragged, no different from a beggar. It's ridiculous that they always lock Esto in the attic, yet criticize his appearance. His parents couldn't care less about Esto, so they just let his siblings bully him like this. "We're leaving first. Remember to wash up before you get there." The whole family left ahead, leaving only a stunned Esto behind. They told him to wash up, but where he was supposed to do that was the problem, as Esto wasn't even allowed to step into the bathroom. The only thing that could provide him with bathwater now was the well in the yard, but Spaya was in the middle of winter, and the thought of bathing in that ice-cold water made Esto hesitate. But in the end, he still had to endure the skin-piercing cold to make himself a little cleaner. The water was so cold it made Esto's skin turn bright red. While Esto was still shivering, a meow echoed from above, and he immediately cheered up. "Suki, there you are." Suki was Esto's black cat. Many years ago, on a cold night when he was very young, he had found her injured in the middle of the prep snow. And since then, Suki had become Esto's companion. She had disappeared early today, and now, upon her return, Suki brought back a beautiful shirt. "This is a gift I received, and now I'm giving it to Esto." Suki jumped down from the roof and rubbed against Esto's leg, but he knew things weren't that simple, so he made Suki tell the truth. It turned out that today, she had saved a little girl from being run over by a horse-drawn carriage on the street, and to demand a reward, Suki insisted on getting this shirt for her master. "You're amazing. Thank you, my kind Suki." Esto scratched her chin a few times and slipped into the shirt. The warm feeling enveloping his body made him feel instantly healed. Suki often brought him strange gifts like this, such as a bag of medicine when he was sick, or 2 pieces of bread when he was starving due to a failed harvest. Although he didn't know exactly how Suki could do it, that was also why Esto cherished this black cat even more. Besides Suki, Esto also had a few other little friends, like that sparrow he named Feria, who often visited his attic, or the neighbors' dogs, Ben and Ricky. Thanks to his ability to communicate with animals, Esto's life was less lonely with these friends around. While Esto was talking to his little friends, a beautiful girl appeared. It was Bella, the prettiest maiden in the region and the same age as Esto. It seemed that because he was uncharacteristically clean and tidy today, it took the girl a moment to recognize him. After exchanging a few words, Bella invited Esto to the festival with her. Meanwhile, at the festival, the villagers had already gathered to drink. Esto's parents and siblings knew he hadn't arrived yet, but they didn't care in the slightest. Only the village chief noticed this. "Esto, where is that boy?" His parents looked at each other, not knowing how to answer, and it was Rosette who spoke up. "I know you think he's a lazy freeloader, but I already told him to get cleaned up. It's a new year, and yet he's still so slow." Terios, who was standing nearby, kept waving his hands, telling them to just ignore Esto. Seeing this indifference, the village chief gradually stopped caring so much. He was about to signal for everyone to start the feast, but was interrupted by a young, blonde-haired man for the reason that Bella still hadn't arrived. At the mention of Bella's name, the atmosphere instantly became much more boisterous. After all, she was the prettiest flower in the region, so the young men were all happy to wait a little longer for her. Not long after, Bella arrived, looking beautiful in a pink dress, and radiantly entered the party. Esto was behind her, but no one paid him any mind. The blonde young man named Luis, as soon as he saw Bella arrive, immediately rushed toward her. When he saw Esto, he also looked stunned by how different Esto looked compared to his usual self. Seeing Esto's hesitation, Bella suddenly flashed a strange smile. Then she grabbed his arm and cheerfully pulled him into the party. This simple act of holding his hand caused Esto to suddenly see a flood of the young woman's memories in front of him, from her mother abandoning her as a child to her getting involved with numerous men, both young and old, in the village. The truth about this seemingly innocent girl left Esto in deep shock, his face turning ashen. Bella wanted to raise her hand to touch his face, but Esto instinctively pushed it away. Realizing his rude behavior, he quickly offered an awkward apology. "Are you mad at me for holding your hand without asking first?" "I'm sorry," Bella asked, putting on an innocent and blameless facade. "No, that's not it at all," Esto replied, feeling extremely awkward. Bella looked as beautiful and pure as an angel, but the things he had just witnessed were truly unsightly. To ensure the party went on smoothly, Esto tried to suppress his emotions and act like he hadn't seen a thing. He grabbed a cup of fruit wine, chose a spot, and sat down. Naturally, Bella sat down right next to him. Out of politeness, Esto tried to make pleasant conversation with her throughout the party, but this inadvertently rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, especially the blonde young man, Luis. What caught his attention wasn't just that Bella was laughing and chatting so happily with Esto, but also the expensive-looking shirt he was wearing. On top of that, he also happened to overhear Esto's parents talking in a corner. They were also discussing the new shirt their son was wearing. "Honey, did you buy him that shirt? I don't think we can afford it, so where did he get it? He must have borrowed it." Esto's mother seemed worried, since no one in their area wore such a uniquely designed shirt. A surge of jealousy welled up inside Luis. After downing his cup of wine, he decided to go and start trouble with the poor boy. "Esto, where'd you buy that shirt? I've never seen a design like this before. It was a gift." Esto answered honestly. Of course, that wasn't the answer Luis was looking for. He slung his arm around Esto's shoulders, his tone becoming increasingly mocking. "A gift? And who might that be? A friend?" Esto replied. Naturally, he couldn't reveal that the shirt was from Suki, because no one would believe him anyway. Besides, he genuinely considered Suki a friend, so his answer wasn't wrong. Even so, the smile on Luis's face twisted into a sneer. "A friend? And who might that be? You have a friend so rich that they can give you such an expensive gift?" Luis's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of everyone at the party. "Just tell the truth. You stole this, didn't you?" This wasn't really a question. It wasn't a question, but an accusation. Esto looked around bewilderedly at everyone at the party, knowing that even if he answered no, nobody would believe him. The horrifying memories of his childhood came flooding back when Esto was always beaten and scolded by the villagers for no reason because they called him a cursed being. Some of the beatings had even nearly taken his life. To ensure her son's survival, his mother locked him in the attic, and so Esto grew up there, living a difficult life. Seeing his silence and darkened expression, Luis was emboldened to press on. "We haven't seen you in a while. You must have gone to the city and stolen these clothes to look so presentable today, huh?" The crowd started whispering. They all believed Luis's accusation was spot on, because someone like Esto couldn't have possibly obtained that nice coat by honest means. His eyes unconsciously searched the crowd for sympathy, but it was completely futile. Even Bella, who just moments ago had looked at him so fondly, was now giving him a disdainful glare. "You monster." A child at the party grabbed an apple from the table and threw it right at Esto. The throw missed him, but hit the oil lamp hanging overhead, and the oil spilled out, pouring all over Esto's head. He had just taken great pains to wash himself in ice-cold water, and with great difficulty, had managed to get a little cleaner, yet now he was once again a filthy and pathetic mess. Esto looked toward his family with the last hope that they would speak up for him. But no, from his parents to his siblings, not a single one of them paid him any attention. His hope for a truly happy family was completely shattered, and that was when Esto realized there was no place for him here. That night, after returning to his familiar attic, he thought for a very long time. Esto kept thinking, then suddenly let out a self-mocking laugh. He just kept laughing and laughing, until he was tired of laughing and tears began to stream down his cheeks. After a long while, Esto made the most important decision of his life. He gathered all his belongings to prepare to leave. To him, it didn't matter where he went. The important thing was that he had to leave this place to find a reason to live for himself. That was the first time Esto ever left the village of Spia. The weather was numbingly cold, and in truth, he had no idea which way to go. Fortunately, along the way, Esto met a kind man who offered him a ride in his horse-drawn carriage, inside which it was a little warmer. Through a crack in the carriage roof, Esto could see the night sky filled with sparkling stars, and as he was gazing at the sky, a small black head peeked in. Meow. Esto was overjoyed. Suki had indeed followed him. And on that night after his coming-of-age ceremony, as he officially left the village he had called home for the past 19 years. Sometime later, Esto woke up. The carriage was still moving, but a complete stranger had appeared in front of him. "Geez, you're an interesting one. Seriously, how can you sleep so soundly in this freezing weather?" Seeing Esto was still sleepy, the guy burst out laughing, then kept cracking jokes. But Esto remained silent. He looked behind the man and saw two very large sword sheaths. Esto guessed this guy was a carriage guard. "Your silence is making me feel awkward. Come on, say something. We went to the trouble of giving you a ride, so don't bore me." Seeing how overly enthusiastic the guy was, Esto finally opened his mouth and managed to squeeze out a sentence. "I'm Esto." It was just a simple introduction, but the other guy looked happier than if he'd struck gold. He introduced himself as Lena, but his full name was actually Lena Rannick Andre. Esto unconsciously nodded in acknowledgement. Your naive look piqued Lena's interest, so he moved closer and started a conversation. "Why did you come to the city? So how are you going to find a job?" Before Esto could even answer, Lena continued, his mouth working at full capacity, like a chatterbox. "My dear country boy, don't think you can just get lucky by coming to the city. There is no such thing as a miracle. You'll have to experience it all for yourself." Esto knew Lena's words came from the perspective of an experienced person, but he hadn't really thought that far ahead, since he had no goals or special talents. Esto's abilities couldn't even help him protect himself, let alone protect others like Lena. Nevertheless, he still wanted to go to the city simply because he wanted to leave that miserable place. It must be said that Lena was quite persistent, even though from the beginning. To the end, Esto was mostly silent. Lena still came up with a ton of things to ask him. Hey, do you have any talents? Looking at you, I bet you can't even lift heavy things, can you? Animals, I'm good at communicating with animals, Esto answered honestly. After all, he really could talk to birds and beasts. With this talent of Esto's, Lena immediately thought of a job for him in the circus. It's not like that. I know what they're thinking, Esto clarified. Lena burst out laughing again. The idea of reading the thoughts of other creatures was completely absurd. It just made him think that Esto must have been on something strong last night. Esto didn't bother to argue further because since he was a child, he had never met anyone with the same ability as him. Through contact, he could read the memories and thoughts of others, those images appearing vividly before his eyes, even when he didn't want them to at all. For example, when he saw Bella's filthy past, this was clearly a power that a human shouldn't possess. Therefore, it was only natural that others wouldn't believe him when he spoke of it. He was still wondering how to change the subject when the carriage suddenly screeched to a halt. Lena dropped his playful demeanor, suddenly becoming serious. He stood up and leaped out of the carriage in a flash. At first, Esto thought they were being attacked by bandits, but after assessing the situation, Lena seemed helpless as the merchant said the carriage horses were suddenly acting up. They refused to move and wouldn't even touch their food. There were quite a few other people on the carriage besides Esto, and they were all getting very impatient as the journey was halted midway. 3 hours later, the horses still hadn't budged. While Esto calmly munched on his bread, the other passengers were all losing their tempers. Lena had a major headache, and while he was wondering how to resolve this situation, he suddenly remembered what Esto had said earlier. I know what they're thinking. Lena's frantic shout startled Esto, making him drop the piece of bread in his hand. He hurriedly pulled him out of the carriage. Let's go. If you're really a psychic, then go see what those horses are thinking. Honestly, Esto really wanted to refuse this task because if the horse's will wasn't strong enough, he wouldn't be able to read their thoughts even if he wanted to. But Lena kept pushing him to go, and that merchant was relentlessly whipping the horses, which made Esto feel pity, so he decided to give it a try. Esto approached the horses, gently cradling their heads as if embracing a lover, even though he'd never been in love before. Very quickly, Esto heard their inner voices. They weren't tired, nor were they hungry. The horses were afraid because the road ahead was full of terrifying dangers. And danger? Why is that? Esto continued to ask it. It's huge and sharp. It's extremely aggressive. It will take the lives of our caretakers. Esto couldn't clearly see what was frightening the horses, but based on their description, it seemed like a monster was waiting for them up ahead. Esto snapped out of his vision, and the horses returned to reality. Seeing him come to, Lena eagerly asked if he heard what the horses were saying. Esto pointed down the road, relaying their message word for word that there was a white-furred monster with bloodshot red eyes, bigger than a horse, with long claws. On top of that, it was furious, and if they stubbornly tried to pass and were attacked, the losses in life and property would be immense. Lena fell silent in thought, but the merchant didn't believe there was a monster up ahead. After all, he had traveled this route countless times before. While he and Lena were talking, Esto quietly went to comfort the horses who, for refusing to move, had been whipped by the merchant until they were covered in wounds. Ultimately, Lena chose to trust Esto because he actually knew of a large creature matching the description, the white-furred ape. It was a rare and elusive being, but one that could certainly appear on this snowy mountain. As soon as the other travelers heard Lena mention the white-furred ape, a buzz went through the group because its fur was highly fashionable among the nobility. That fact alone was enough to put it on every hunter's radar. But isn't it just a beast, not a monster? There's no reason for the horses to be so scared of it, the merchant asked. Just then, Lena retrieved his 2 large swords from the carriage. Since the horses refused to move, he had no choice but to investigate the situation himself. But the main point was that he wanted Esto to go with him. Having been a coward his whole life, Esto wanted no part in this dangerous mission, but luckily, Lena wasn't going alone. He was accompanied by several other mercenaries, all with exceptional skills, so one could feel somewhat at ease. However, the only one who seemed at ease was Lena. Esto was still completely baffled as to why he, who didn't know the first thing about fighting, had to go with them. You have to come too. What if we need a translator? Lena said casually, then pulled Esto along by the hand. Along the way, Esto was a nervous wreck, because according to the horses, the enemy was far more terrifying than a white-furred ape. It had to be a vicious monster, or maybe even something beyond that. Esto had struggled to escape the village of Spia just to survive, and he was not happy at all about being dragged into another life-threatening situation. But Lena's attitude gave Esto pause. He seemed unusually interested and cheerful upon learning about Esto's ability. This was a stark contrast to his own family, where everyone despised Esto for this supernatural power. They had gradually distanced themselves from him after realizing he could read their minds. That's why Esto had lived a lonely life for nearly 20 years. He continued walking, lost in these thoughts, until one of the mercenaries signaled for a halt, snapping Esto back to reality. The cold was biting, and he tried to pull his collar up a little higher. Standing amidst the fully equipped mercenaries, Esto looked even more frail and small. One of them used their light skill, instantly illuminating the entire area. Esto felt the snow beneath his feet tremble. It seemed the creature had finally appeared. Foolish humans, today I will send every last one of you to the afterlife. Indeed, it was a giant white-furred monkey, and of course, only Esto could hear the words it spoke. And that very fact terrified him. To be able to understand a creature's emotions without touching it, that creature must possess an incredibly strong will. From such a great distance, Esto could already feel the opponent's boundless killing intent. Just how dangerous could it possibly be? Esto felt they had no chance of winning this fight. He valued his own life, so he advised Lena to turn back. But not only Lena, but all the remaining mercenaries refused, because this was the only path leading to the city. What other monster could there be besides this one? Lena drew his sword as Esto replied, "No, but this one is extremely dangerous." He knew his advice was useless, because there were several mercenaries here and only one monkey. Naturally, they all wanted to have a life or death battle with it to carve a bloody path back to the city. The monster let out a roar, and Esto felt as if the world around him was shaking violently. He couldn't even stand steady, yet Lena seemed very excited. And not just him, the rest of them were exactly the same. Esto thought these people were insane, completely insane. He still tried to stop them, but before he could even open his mouth, Lena had already dashed forward. His speed was incredible, and Lena's attacks were so fast that it was hard to even follow with the naked eye. The rest of the team also rushed in to support him. Among them were an archer and a mage. Each one busily unleashed their most powerful techniques, wanting to overwhelm the enemy, but unexpectedly. This monster had incredibly thick skin. The damage they dealt barely scratched it and only made it even more furious. The moment Esto saw the white-furred monkey's eyes turn cloudy with rage as it let out another ferocious roar, only one thought appeared in his mind. We're screwed. It was only then that the mercenaries seemed to finally realize the monster's danger. It began to counterattack. With just a single swipe of its hand, it sent the nearby bald archer flying dozens of feet away. Just as he hit the ground, the white-furred monkey's massive hand lunged for him. The young man felt his life was over. Yet Esto, who had no fighting experience whatsoever, rushed forward at that moment, using his own frail body to shield the other man. He used almost all the strength he had to shout at the giant monkey. "That's enough. Please calm down." The monkey's blood-red, cloudy eyes cleared, and it seemed a bit surprised to see a human who could communicate with it. Esto began to feel hopeful, planning to negotiate with the monkey instead of resorting to bloodshed. But just then, Lena appeared from behind and ruined all of his plans. "I told you to watch your distance," he yelled, obviously at the bald archer. As soon as the words left his mouth, Lena used his two swords to slash two long gashes across the monster's back. It roared in pain, and then clutched its face and fled into the forest. The mercenaries quickly gave chase, determined to finish the monster off. Only Esto remained, sitting in the cold snow, still in shock. In that moment, he knew the beast had understood him. It had stopped and then fled for its life. And what Esto heard at that moment was completely at odds with the fearsome appearance of this monster. "Mommy, I'm so scared. Mommy." If that was the white-furred monkey's inner voice, then Esto. Feeling like he couldn't just sit there any longer, he jumped up and followed the sound he heard, eventually finding a cave. In front of the cave were countless footprints not yet erased by the blizzard. It seemed the ape hadn't returned to the cave for long, and the surroundings were extremely quiet. He guessed that the group of warriors hadn't found this place yet. Esto took a risk and cautiously stepped inside. Inside, the overwhelming stench of blood made him unconsciously cover his nose. Esto went deeper into the cave and saw the white-furred ape. It was sitting with its face to the rock wall. For some reason, he suddenly found it strangely lonely and pitiful. Esto took another step. He was immediately pulled into the white-furred ape's memories. It turned out this ape was a hybrid of a white-furred ape and a human. Its mother was a beautiful blonde woman. Not long ago, also on a day of ice and snow, its father and his kind left the cave and found a severely injured girl. They carried the girl on their backs and brought her to the cave. When she woke up, the first thing they did was bring her a delicious piece of meat. In the following days, its father took great care of the girl. Eventually, the girl was moved and decided to stay in the cave. A love that transcended racial boundaries blossomed. And this ape was the result of that love. When he was born, he looked very cute, so he was given the beautiful name Nura. Nura's life was once very happy with such a beautiful and gentle mother, until a group of hunters found the cave. Even though Nura's mother was also human, they didn't spare her. That was the day the little ape turned dark, becoming a monster. Esto fell silent, so this was the reason the ape was always whimpering, "Mommy, I'm so scared." Now, it seemed to have calmed down, even mistaking Esto for its mother. "I'm not your mother. My name is Esto." The white-furred ape looked at him for a long time. Its ferocious demeanor was completely gone, and now it looked like an innocent child. "Did you come to kill me too, Esto?" "No," he replied immediately. Honestly, Esto didn't know where he got the courage to come to a monster's lair. He just felt that he had to be here. Nura looked sad. He began to recount the tragedy of his life. Even though Esto had already seen everything, he listened quietly as he spoke. Those wicked hunters had murdered Nura's entire family, turning him from a happy child into a monster. "I don't understand why they would do such a thing. It was probably for money," Esto answered Nura, not even knowing what money was. Upon hearing Esto's words, he genuinely hoped that if he had money, he could see his mother and family again. Although the creature before him was like an innocent child, Esto had to crush his false hopes. Nura and his mother would never be able to meet again. Even a beast like Nura had human-like emotional awareness when he truly understood that he had lost his mother forever. He suddenly burst into tears. Esto stood still and listened to him cry for a long time until Nura wiped his own tears and stopped crying. "I was really so angry. I thought about killing all of humanity. But when you appeared, Esto, I found that I no longer cared about that." Esto suddenly felt guilty, as if because he had controlled the other's emotions. Nura couldn't even be angry about his own grudge anymore. He spent time staying and talking with the ape for a long time, until it truly calmed down. Nura turned and went deeper into the cave. He said he wanted to rest. Esto then said goodbye and left the cave. Outside, the blizzard was raging again, and I felt like I was about to freeze solid, but just then, Suki appeared with Esto's bag. "I'm so glad you're okay." Esto breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing it. "I'm not so weak that I'd get hurt by some nameless punk," Suki said with an air of contempt, and it seemed the nameless punk it was referring to was Nura. After giving the cloak to Esto, Suki turned to return to the carriage, but Esto couldn't bear to leave Nura here. After all, it was seriously injured, and if it was found by hunters, it would have no chance of survival. Suki shot him another contemptuous look. "You still want to stay here? Even if you might freeze to death?" Esto was silent for a few seconds, then he resolutely decided to stay in the cave, where Nura was now asleep. Esto put on his cloak and leaned against it, but it didn't seem to make him much warmer. It seemed that Nura lived in a place that was cold year-round, so its body temperature was hardly any warmer than the weather. Esto didn't leave because he felt he couldn't abandon a child, and Suki didn't leave either. Even though it knew it needed to return to the carriage, it couldn't abandon Esto. Suki waited outside the cave entrance for a long time until it was sure Esto had fallen asleep, then it slowly entered. But now, it no longer had the appearance of a small black cat, but that of a mighty, jet-black tiger. Although it wasn't happy about it at all, in the end, Suki still had to lie down beside him, protecting its master's safety. Suddenly, it remembered the distant days of many years ago. Suki was originally an experimental product with the designation N121, and from birth, it possessed incredible power. But because of that power, Suki was also very difficult to tame, so the very scientists who created it ordered its destruction. Suki was lucky to escape death that night, but it was also severely injured. Suki just ran desperately, hoping to survive. It ran for a very long time and a very long way, and finally, when it was exhausted, Suki had lost almost all its power and transformed into a black cat. In the moment, it was on the verge of death. Its strong will allowed Esto, who was quite far away, to hear its cry for help, and then, as we know, he saved Suki's life. The two abandoned creatures gave each other warmth and relied on one another, even to this day. Not long after, Suki woke up to a voice, and Esto was already awake. "Thanks. Because of you, I was able to rest without catching a cold. Are you hurt anywhere?" Suki coldly asked in return. Esto shook his head, and only then did Suki relax, shaking its body a few times and turning back into a docile black cat. Nura's injuries had gotten much better by now, because it was a beast after all, and the wound on its back was almost completely healed, and there was no more activity in the surrounding area. It had been quite a while, so Esto was sure that no more groups of hunters or warriors were pursuing them, so he was planning to part ways with the ape here. "Esto," Nura suddenly spoke, not telepathically, but it actually knew how to speak, which even startled Suki with its illogicalness. Perhaps because its mother was a human, Nura had also inherited some human characteristics. Because Esto was a special human, Nura wanted to go with him. It was confident that with its strength, it could protect Esto. Above all, since its family had all left this world, Nura didn't want to be alone. This wish from the white-furred ape put Esto in a difficult position. After all, his destination was a large city, and Nura's size was not small at all, so it couldn't be hidden. He was afraid it would be attacked by humans, and also afraid it would go berserk upon seeing them. "I think maybe I will. Asterisk, asterisk. Angry? If I see the ones who harm my family, yes, but I don't care about other humans." Nura tried to keep bargaining, but Esto warned, "There will probably be many who want to take your life." He didn't expect that Nura, far from being scared, merely chuckled. "In that case, I can get angry to defend myself, right?" Nura's sparkling eyes completely convinced Esto, and so he had to bring the monkey along with him to the city. Upon arriving in the city, Suki disappeared again, but Esto wasn't surprised. After all, it wasn't the first time, and it would surely reappear when it mattered. As expected, Nura quickly attracted the attention of others. Luckily, right now it just looked like an ordinary monkey, so people just saw it as Esto's pet. A few guards stopped him and reminded him that medium-sized pets needed to be leashed. They then brought over a large collar and chain. Esto hesitated for a long time, not wanting to use this to restrain Nura. But contrary to his own terrible mood, the little monkey seemed quite happy. Esto, it's fine, just do it. If I really wanted to break it, what could possibly stop me? After a moment of internal struggle, Esto had no choice but to put the collar on Nura. Seeing this, the two guards left, relieved. Esto seemed very sad. I'm sorry for making you endure this kind of treatment. Nura didn't blame him in the slightest. On the contrary, it felt that Esto was just like its mother, because its mother in the past also always said, I'm sorry. At first, Nura was very curious and asked why she apologized so much, but every time it asked, she wouldn't answer. Much later, after hearing it so often, Nura finally understood what that apology meant. Mom said I'm sorry with the meaning of I love you, I think. Esto seemed to have a weight lifted from his heart. To him, Nura wasn't a pet at this point. Just like Suki, it was a companion to Esto in this lonely life. After entering the city, the first thing Esto did was look for hired work, but he was rejected time and time again due to his frail physique, and what's more, he was accompanied by a huge beast. The merchants on the street advised Esto that it would be better to look for work at the guild. This was the first time Esto had heard of the concept of a guild. They pointed him to a building in the center of town called Ignis, and so, Esto led Nura towards the town center. Ignis was so dazzling, it was hard to miss. In front of the entrance was a sign guaranteeing it was the best guild, with a commission completion rate of up to 99.9%. Esto pushed the door open and walked in, greeted by a beautiful and cheerful receptionist. At first, she thought he was a client. After learning Esto was there to apply as a new member, she directed him to go straight upstairs to fill out an application form. The person in charge upstairs was a middle-aged man. With just a glance at Esto's appearance, he knew the boy had just come from the countryside. Hello, I heard you're recruiting new members. That's right. Do you know what kind of work a guild usually does? I understand that you accept commissions and resolve them. It's simple. The man looked at Esto with the classic expression one gives a naive newcomer. He then took out a business card and handed it to him, and introduced himself as Ha, the branch manager of the Ignis Guild in Galaxia. After taking the business card, Esto followed him to a nearby sofa. Normally, Ha would decide whether to interview a new applicant after reviewing their resume. But recently, commissions had been flooding in while the guild's manpower was extremely limited, so he decided to skip the application review and go straight to the interview. Hack began his interview with very basic questions like where Sto was from and how old he was. From the moment he saw him, Hack had been keeping an eye on Nura. What is your specialty? Animal taming. Something like that. Something like that? You'd better not use those words to describe it. I need to know exactly what you're good at so I can assign you a suitable job. Sto didn't want others to know too much about his ability because he was afraid of being shunned like his family and the villagers of Spaya had done. But he really needed this job, so he had no choice but to tell Hack everything. Upon hearing that Sto could listen to the inner voices of living creatures, the pen in his hand suddenly stopped. Hack never expected this country bumpkin-looking kid to be an ability user, but he had never heard of the power to read the minds of creatures before. The world's ability users weren't too rare. From mages, elementalists, alchemists, apothecaries, and priests to swordsmen. They created magic by using mana or connecting with elemental spirits, and each class had its own unique path. Some discovered and utilized special laws, while others could heal wounds. Most of the ability users in the world were clearly classified, but the strange ability Sto just mentioned didn't fit into any of those classes. This made Hack a bit hesitant. Please forgive me, if I had known you were an ability user, I wouldn't have bothered with this kind of interview. Sto was now like a hidden card because of the strange ability he possessed. Depending on that ability, he could become Ignis's trump card, or he could be completely useless. But Hack was a businessman, and he didn't intend to pass up any opportunity, so he decided to test Sto by giving him his first mission. Go find the animal trader at house number 3 on Sack Street. He's an animal collector who is part of Gui, but lately, he seems to be having trouble with a few rare species he owns. If you truly have the ability to tame animals, you should be able to solve that problem. Sto nodded, understanding what Hack wanted him to do. Then, the man gave Sto a map and told him that if he succeeded, he would receive a Gui token from the merchant. That item would serve as proof of his success. Once he had the Gui token in hand, Sto could become an official member of Ignis. He took the map and led Nura to the address on it. Thanks to Nura's sense of smell, someone with no sense of direction like Sto managed to avoid wandering aimlessly through the streets. He arrived at house number 3 on Sack Street. 2 guard dogs were at the entrance, initially baring their fangs and glaring at Sto, but after being glared at by Nura, both dogs began trembling like leaves. Seeing them like this, Sto found it both funny and pitiful. You don't have to be scared. I'm not going to attack you, so don't worry. I'm here to see the owner of this place. Stowe comforted them, conveniently reaching out to pat each of them on the head. His ability to control animal emotions helped him calm the two dogs quickly. While Stowe was busy chatting with them, the owner of the place came out and opened the door. The man didn't look well. He was probably going crazy over the rare acquisitions he had just purchased. The man led Stowe inside the house. His collection was quite impressive, but he led him straight to a cage. Inside the glass was a tiny, gasping dragon. According to the man, it had been thrashing around and struggling ever since he bought it, and refused to eat. What a damn little pup, it's driving me crazy. The man grumbled and cursed as he spoke, but because of his special ability, Esto could hear the man's truest inner voice. Little one, please don't be sick anymore, okay? Turns out he was just cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. Esto glanced from the man's bald head to the struggling dragon. In the cage, it was still just a baby. What are you? What the hell are you talking about? That's obvious, the man yelled right in his ear, nearly bursting Esto's eardrums. He wanted to discipline the dragon from a young age. Otherwise, when it grew up, it could attack people, and if that caused the nobles to complain about the sale of dangerous beasts, he'd be out of a job. The man's attitude was incredibly harsh, but Esto paid him no mind, focusing only on the little dragon in front of him to find the root of the problem. Suddenly, Esto felt a sharp pain shoot through his chest, as if it were about to explode, causing him to fall backward. Fortunately, Nura caught his master just in time. Seeing this, the man was startled. Hey, what's wrong? Kid, are you hurt somewhere? No, I'm not the one in pain. This is the dragon's pain, Esto panted in response. Just then, the dragon slowly opened its eyes, sat up straight, and gave an innocent look directly at Esto. He immediately entered a vision containing its memories. Seeing Esto suddenly go silent, the man grew more impatient. Hey kid, are you paralyzed or something? Damn it, why did you stop talking mid-sentence? After a long moment, Esto finally replied in a sad tone. This child, its heart is melting. What does that mean? What nonsense are you spouting? The man yelled in confusion. Esto explained to him that this species of dragon usually lives in extremely cold water, but right now he had taken it out of the water and even covered the bottom of the cage with sawdust, so the dragon couldn't breathe and was slowly drying out. Hearing this, the man flew into a rage. Who are you trying to fool, you little brat? This Drakey dragon is a monster that lives in the desert. You can tell just by the name. What kind of nonsense are you talking about? I said its heart, which is made of ice, is melting. Due to his hot-tempered nature, the man was about to argue further, but Esto's determined gaze made him reconsider. After all, he wanted to do everything he could to save this little dragon. Therefore, the man grabbed the shovel next to the cage and threw it to Esto. Go outside and shovel some snow in here, he ordered. Why just me? You expect an old man like me to do it? I don't have any ice right now, so a strong young man like you should hurry up and get some snow. If you're too slow, both you and this troublesome little Drakey will be goners. With that, he lifted the small dragon out of the cage and placed it in a glass basin filled with water nearby. After coming into contact with the cool water, the little one's facial muscles visibly relaxed. The man finally broke into a happy smile, then yelled at Esto again, Hurry up and bring the snow. Esto dropped the first shovel of snow into the water tank under the man's eager gaze. After that, the man made him shovel several more loads. Esto, of course, knew he was being used for hard labor, but with his overflowing love for animals, he was still willing to do it. And thanks to that effort, the ice Drakey, that one had truly recovered. Drakys were already a rare species, but among them were even rarer ice variants, so they weren't widely known. Back, Esto could finally breathe a sigh of relief, but the man, of course, had no intention of letting him rest so soon, like that, because besides this Drakey, he still had a bunch of other rare animals waiting to be cared for. Esto felt as if he had become a veterinarian in just one afternoon, while the man had to truly acknowledge that the abilities of the boy were the real deal. After settling the issues, the man gave him a bag of geek coins as a work fee. The work was originally completed, but Esto kept hesitating and couldn't leave, because he could hear the inner voices of the animals in the man's house. They were all reluctant to see him go, and now he could clearly hear every single one of their thoughts, even while standing all the way outside the door. This proved that they were all okay. Thinking of this, Esto's nose suddenly tingled with emotion. He led Nura back to Ignis, but halfway there, vague thoughts began to flood his mind. Esto truly didn't know where his future would go and what would happen to a cursed child like him. The negative thoughts and his unhappy past made Esto tremble for a moment, and he slumped down on the roadside to Nura's confusion. Are you okay? Are you cold? It anxiously asked one question after another, and not long after, Suki also appeared. She always showed up when her master needed her most. What are you doing here? It seems you're not hurt. Get up. You'll catch a cold sitting in the cold for too long. Sometimes Esto didn't know if Suki was the cat he picked up or his mother, but the fact that she never left made him feel that this life was a bit more meaningful. For example, Suki hated being touched by humans, but when Esto petted her head, she didn't avoid it at all. Thank you, Suki, Esto suddenly said. For what? The sassy black cat was curious. For not avoiding me. It's been so long, and you still don't get it at all. Esto, to me you are completely different from those other humans. Do what you want. I will never avoid you ever. After saying that, Suki tiptoed away. After calming his emotions, Esto and Nura returned to Ignis, and he received a reward of 2 Gi coins. This made Hack quite surprised, as that man was notoriously difficult, yet today he was so generous. This proved that Esto's abilities were real. Hack felt like he had struck gold, and immediately changed his attitude towards him. Welcome. From now on, you are a member of Ignis. After that, Hack even specially took Esto to get his uniform and Gi identification badge. From now on, he would have to wear it on missions, and he was even willing to provide a place for Esto to stay. Although the facilities here weren't the best, compared to the old attic he had lived in for a decade, it was perfect. Moreover, Hack also allowed Nura to stay, so Esto had no reason to refuse. After he explained all the rules at Ignis, Esto led Nura to his new room. They both cleaned up, and then Esto put on his brand new uniform. He looked at himself in the mirror. This was the first time Esto had seen himself looking so neat and tidy. The bed was also soft, and the blanket was warmer than at home. Next to the bed was a large window, and the faint moonlight shining through the frame suddenly reminded Esto of the past. During those miserable days in the attic, he found it hard to sleep and turned to ask Nura, "Hey, are you asleep?" "Not yet." Nura replied from the floor. "Do you have any regrets?" Esto suddenly asked, "About what? That you followed me?" Perhaps because he possessed the ability to read the minds of other creatures, Esto was more sensitive than the average person. Therefore, ever since arriving in the city, he had always felt guilty towards Nura because she had to wear a chain and her freedom was restricted, and she was constantly stared at by everyone, not to mention their path ahead would be even more difficult. Although it was very difficult, Esto still wanted to take Nura back to the mountains to return her freedom. However, what Nura said next proved that his worries were unnecessary. Not only did she not regret it, but she was also happy to have followed Esto and ended her previous lonely existence. Nura also no longer had to live in constant hatred of humans, which was what made her feel that this life was truly worth living. Nura's words were gentle, yet they made Esto want to cry. He buried his face deep into his pillow, trying to restrain his emotions. In the past, during the time he was locked in the attic, Esto had received an old dictionary from his older brother. He had taught himself how to read and write the words in it, but couldn't fully understand the meaning of them all. But now, Esto seemed to finally understand. The days spent with Nura had taught him the true meaning of the word bond, that even though they were not of the same race or from the same circumstances, from now on they would be inseparable, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. The next morning, Esto woke up early as usual, and after straightening his uniform, he walked downstairs to Hack's amazement. Well, who's this? I almost didn't recognize you. Turns out, you look pretty sharp in that uniform, Esto. Oh, branch chief. Who's this? A new employee? A petite, brown-haired girl with glasses appeared out of nowhere and suddenly spoke up. Hack introduced the two to each other. The girl's name was Rosalie, also a member of the guild. He also introduced Esto to her as a new member, but explained he wouldn't be working in the job support department, nor in magic support or combat support. Hearing this, Rosalie became curious and asked in a low voice, "Didn't you say he was an ability user? So why isn't he on the magic or combat team?" "Well, his ability is a bit special. We have to at least wait for a response from the higher-ups before we can decide." Noticing Esto seemed tense, Hack took out a jar of colorful candies. Out of respect for him, Esto had no choice but to take one and put it in his mouth, though he didn't feel any less tense. "All right, go get the guild seal." Hack returned to the main topic. "You just need to have it stamped on your skin. It has to be the black rubber brand, so check it carefully. Just one set will be enough. Oh, and one more thing. While you're out, if you see a unicorn feather quill, buy it as well." Esto didn't know what those things were for, but if Hack mentioned them, they were surely not useless. So he went out and asked around, then went to the nearest general store in the square to buy them. But the owner of this store was quite odd, because when Esto arrived, she was busy fumbling with something and had absolutely no intention of serving customers. It wasn't until the girl found what she was looking for that she noticed the customer was still standing there waiting. The two of them made eye contact for less than 3 seconds before her gaze immediately fell on Nura beside him. With a psyche as fragile as a pane of glass, the girl named Yaji let out a blood-curdling scream. "Oh my god, a monster." Unfortunately, she was also sitting on a ladder. After that scream, her balance faltered and she fell backward, but luckily Esto caught her. Otherwise, she would have broken a leg or an arm. Despite holding a beautiful woman in his arms, Esto's expression didn't change at all. He just seriously reminded the girl that it wasn't a monster. Its name was Nura. Looking at him up close, she saw that he was actually quite handsome. The girl couldn't help but blush like a tomato, and after landing safely, she began her search for the necessary items for Esto, but halfway through, her expression suddenly changed. "Oh no, where's my magic orb?" "You just dropped it over there." Esto answered nonchalantly. "This girl looks pretty but seems a bit ditzy." She found her magic orb. looking happier than if she were going to a festival. Esto couldn't be bothered with her, and after getting what he needed, he turned to leave but was called back by the girl. "Hey you, wait a moment. What's your name?" Esto thought it was something important, but it turned out the girl wanted him to try out the magic orb in her hand. According to her, it was a new product that she had risked a lot to obtain. It was a magic orb that could read other people's emotions, an ability that might seem like a divine power to others, but to Esto, it was useless because he had possessed it since birth. "I don't need it," Esto bluntly refused. "Really? Why not?" "Because no one would want to read something like another person's heart. The ability to read others' thoughts, memories, or emotions is the most useless power in the world," Esto replied, then opened the door and left. The general store owner behind him was still bewildered, feeling that this guy was handsome but a bit strange. He talked as if he could really read other people's minds. Esto returned to Ignis, completing the final steps to become an official member of the guild. While waiting for his superiors to decide on his assignment, he just did chores like watering flowers and cleaning the house. A few days later, HCK brought some good news. Esto had been assigned to the Special Support Division, and his first request had arrived after becoming an official member of the guild. The client was Fabian, the only 10-year-old daughter of the Fabian family. The problem she was facing seemed to be that her puppy, Haru, absolutely refused to listen to her, and Saralyn wanted someone to help her turn Haru into a well-behaved dog. Esto's mood was a bit complicated after becoming a member of Ignis. He had thought he would get more significant missions, but he never expected to be training a dog. But HCK thought this was great. Esto's abilities didn't require training or combat experience. The main clientele were high-ranking nobles, so he could satisfy them without much effort and bring in the money, which was a good thing. Seeing Esto sigh deeply, HCK started using his entire vocabulary to make the issue sound more serious. "It may look simple, but the problem is that you also have to meet the nobles' demands. If you get on their bad side, not only will this request be cancelled, but your future life could also be ruined, so be careful." He also constantly reminded Esto not to look down on Saralyn just because she's a child. A noble is a noble, even if they're only 2 months old, and you must serve her with all your strength. Well then, good luck. Alright, let's hope Esto's commission is successful in producing a well-behaved puppy. Hack brought over the candy jar again, and Esto picked out a piece to put in his mouth before setting off with Nura. The Fabian mansion was absolutely massive, and after checking the commission request, the guards quickly let him inside. The interior was even more magnificent, but the only thing that caught Esto's attention was the resentful barking of the small dog inside. Getting a little closer, he could also hear its inner voice, which was just as resentful. "Not again. Go away, you human. Haru, don't be like that. He's our guest." A small, pretty, blonde-haired girl ran out from the house. Based on her age, this must be Lady Saralyn. Watching the way Saralyn talked and behaved with Haru, Esto could easily sense the girl's love for animals, but unfortunately, Haru was not an obedient dog. Esto introduced himself as a member of Gi, and a doubtful expression immediately appeared on Saralyn's face. "I thought it would be some grumpy old man. So a girly-looking guy like you works at Gi's too? How old are you?" This kid's got a real attitude. Esto wasn't too pleased, but since the customer is always right, he still swallowed his anger and answered her question. He had just turned 19 this year. While the two were talking, Haru in the background was still barking incessantly. The loud barking had started to annoy Nura. From behind Esto, it gently threw Haru a murderous glare, causing the puppy to immediately shut its mouth. At that moment, Lady Saralyn also noticed its presence, but instead of being afraid of the large creature, she looked very interested. "That gorilla is so big and so cute." Nura immediately retracted its murderous gaze, switching to sparkling, watery eyes to win her over. Lady Saralyn was instantly charmed. The girl was about to rush forward, but was stopped by a house servant for a very simple reason. Nura was a white-furred ape, and they couldn't let their lady get close to danger. After a moment of pouting because she couldn't pat Nura's cheeks, Saralyn decided to get back to the main issue. "I heard you can read the hearts of animals, so find out why my Haru is always so hostile to others. Right now?" The young lady's eager demeanor made Esto not dare to delay any longer. First, he told Nura to step back for a moment, because Haru was currently scared, stiff by it. Only Esto and Haru were left facing each other. To gain the puppy's trust, Esto took off his gloves and held his hand close to its face. "Haru, I'm not going to hurt you." Saralyn looked tense, because normally no one dared to do that with Haru for fear of being bitten. But the strange thing was, today, after a moment's hesitation, it proactively moved forward and used its head to nuzzle Esto's hand. His ability was greatly amplified by this contact, and Esto immediately entered its inner world. It turned out Haru had an unhappy puppyhood, having witnessed its mother being grabbed by humans by the neck and cruelly discarded right after it was born. Because small breeds like Haru were very popular with nobles, its mother had been forced to give birth many times. Even Haru itself, after losing its mother, wasn't fed enough. It was only given just enough food to not starve to death in order to maintain the small appearance that nobles found so appealing. Not long after, Haru was spotted by Viscount Fabian, the father of Saralyn. The merchants immediately took the small dog, which was barely breathing from hunger, and washed it clean to be sold. Haru became the most beautiful birthday present for the young lady, but for it, this was also when its hatred for humans began, to its peak, because they had taken its mother away and pushed it into endless suffering. Saralyn really liked Haru, and she tried her best to care for the little puppy, but Haru never felt happy being with her. It all came to a head one day when, while they were playing around, Haru bit Saralyn hard on the hand. Seeing this, Viscount Fabian immediately kicked the puppy, as he could not accept a dog that bites its owner, and immediately wanted to throw Haru out of the mansion. Saralyn cried and begged her father, as she didn't want to be separated from the new friend she had just made, so she asked Viscount Fabian to send a commission to Ignis. After fully understanding the situation, Esto could only sigh. Saralyn was extremely anxious. How is he? Is Haru unhappy about something? Everything. Haru was afraid of all the affection she showed it. Even though it was just a puppy, Haru was also just a child, and since birth, it had never received love. Esto recounted the entire ordeal it had gone through from the moment it was born, which made Haru believe that one day, humans would also take its life just like how they took its mother away. Hearing Esto's words, Saralyn could only grit her teeth and think to herself, what? I'm the one who likes Haru the most. If I could read hearts, I would treat him even better. These naive thoughts of hers were also overheard by Esto. Just being able to read hearts isn't everything. Its mother was killed by humans, and it was also forced to starve to increase its value. Have you ever considered how to soothe its fear? Saralyn finally couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears, even though this was an act that would cause a young noble lady like her to lose all her elegance. Esto could understand Saralyn's behavior, for even as a noble, she was still just a child, and moreover, a child filled with love for animals, especially for Haru. To resolve this conflict, Esto created a mental world for the little dog and led Saralyn into it. Here, she could converse with Haru. After this, Haru itself also came to fully understand the young lady's feelings for it, but it still hoped Saralyn could express her affection a bit more gently, instead of actions like lifting it high up and spinning it around and around. Haru slowly stepped forward and nuzzled the hem of its owner's dress. Saralyn also cautiously bent down and held out her hand, then carefully took Haru into her arms. That was the moment their two souls truly connected, and it was also when Esto completed his mission. Saralyn was so happy she cried, "Thank you, Ignis. That was truly amazing. Even though I was the one who made the request, I really had no idea this ability existed." Saralyn held Haru in her arms, her happiness unconcealable, and she couldn't stop blaming herself for not having understood the puppy all this time. "You are not at fault. The people who sold Haru are the ones in the wrong, and he only misunderstood your intentions because it was completely different from anything he had ever experienced." Since Saralyn was a child, Esto made an exception and offered her a few more words of encouragement. Hearing him say that, Saralyn smiled as brightly as a flower. The commission was complete, and she handed the sui to him. Just as Esto accepted it, Viscount Fabian appeared. "You possess a truly wonderful ability," he praised with sincerity. Seeing her father, Saralyn joyfully rushed into his arms. From now on, she no longer had to worry about Viscount Fabian throwing Haru out for being a dog that bites its owner anymore. It turned out, Viscount Fabian and young Master Jeremy had just returned to the mansion, and they had been watching from outside all of Esto's abilities, so he's very curious about your power. "From what I've observed, your ability is used to handle rather unusual situations, wouldn't you say? What exactly is this power?" "It's the ability to read the hearts of animals," Esto answered without hiding anything. Viscount Fabian was silent for about 3 seconds, then uttered 3 words, "What a liar." Before even waiting for Esto to explain or react, the man continued, "Don't you know what happens when a commoner like you dares to lie to a nobleman?" Esto immediately tensed up. It seemed that because the mission was complete, he had let his guard down too soon. Nobles like him are never easy to deal with, are they? I'm quite interested to see how exactly you define what you call an animal. Is it based on intellect or the soul? What about human-beast hybrids? Esto always tried to hide the fact that he could also read human thoughts by claiming he could only listen to the hearts of animals, but it seemed this nobleman was sharper than he had imagined. It's just that while he was probing Esto, he also accidentally overheard the thoughts of the son, Jeremy. No way. If he can really read other people's hearts, then he's a monster. These thoughts from Jeremy truly did hurt Esto. But anyway, ever since he was a child, he had been considered a cursed monster, so one more person thinking that way didn't change much. The problem now lay with the nobleman. It seemed Viscount Fabian was genuinely interested in Esto's one-of-a-kind ability, even though he only vaguely stated that he would soon send more requests to Ignis. But Esto knew that in the future, he and the Viscount would surely be seeing a lot more of each other. This grand conversation between the adults was beyond Saralyn's understanding. She was just happy that she managed to learn Esto's name before he left, and of course, Saralyn was also grateful that he had sorted out the trouble for her. But her brother, the young master, Jeremy, was clearly wary of Esto. He didn't even want his sister getting too close to him. "Does that ability of yours have any limits? I can't read everything, so I won't be reading your mind, so please don't worry. Are you sure? Or are you just saying that while reading everything in my head?" Jeremy suddenly became irritated. He didn't want someone who could read all his thoughts in his house for another second, so he rudely shoved Esto out the door. Saralyn was startled by her brother's aggression and started crying. After all, Esto was the one who had helped her reconcile with Haru, and now Jeremy was treating him this way, which made her very unhappy. Esto returned with Nura as dusk began to fall. The two words "a monster" that Jeremy had uttered kept replaying in his mind. Even though he was used to it, it would be a lie to say he wasn't sad. Esto gazed at the Subi coin in his hand and once again, suddenly felt lost in this life. Humans are so strange. Nura suddenly spoke, catching Esto's confused gaze. Before he could ask anything, it continued, "Nura feels very happy when Esto reads my heart. Esto can know Nura's thoughts without me even having to say them." Esto knew that it was comforting him. What Nura just said sounded wonderful, but it was also the very reason humans hated his ability. Esto's existence was indeed too abnormal, and it made him feel out of place in this world, even though. Yet Nura didn't find him scary at all. To it, Esto was kinder than everyone else. He also had a kind heart. What was truly wrong wasn't Esto's ability, but the filthy thoughts that other people concealed. Nura said a lot, but it was all from its heart, not just made up to comfort Esto, so he reached out and patted the monkey's head to reassure it. "Don't worry. No matter if anyone gets angry or is scared of me, even if they think I'm a monster, I don't care at all, because compared to being locked up in the Sept Tower, it's when we get to walk together like this that I finally feel like I'm truly living." And so, the man and the monkey returned to Guy. Esto ignored the insults from young Master Jeremy and continued on with his life. A few days later, he seemed to have caught the Lord's attention, as that person directly sent a request to Guy. This made H and Rosalie very happy. Actually, because his ability was so special, this was somewhat predictable, but neither of them expected his fame to skyrocket so quickly. Compared to the enthusiastic expressions of H and Rosalie, Esto seemed rather somber, because he knew that the more people who noticed him, the more danger he would be in. But regardless, he still had to work to survive, and so Esto went on to accept the next special support request. This time, the request was related to the Jefferson Company, which held the largest share of the gem trade in the city. For some reason, the company had suddenly closed down, throwing the jewelry businesses into turmoil. Esto's mission was to find the company's owner, Thompson, and investigate the reason. Just like every other time, after confirming his mission, Esto prepared to set off with Nura. But today, before leaving, he noticed something. It seemed that every time he went out on a mission, H would rush after him just to say something like, "Remember to stay safe." And today, Rosalie also specifically reminded him to buy some cantaloupe bread on his way back after completing the mission. They were just small remarks, but they moved Esto, because this was the first time he had felt a warmth like that of a family. The first thing Esto did after leaving Gui was to check the map, but today's location was a bit far. If he walked, it would take a whole hour. While he was racking his brain for a solution, Nura suddenly turned its rear towards him. "Let Nura carry Esto. I run much faster than Esto. You'll get tired if you walk for too long." Esto had never considered Nura a pet, let alone a mount, so he refused. But this unintentionally made it sad, because Nura felt useless, unable to help Esto in any way. In the end, not wanting to disappoint Nura, Esto reluctantly agreed to climb onto its back. And indeed, Nura ran very fast. It didn't take the man and the monkey much time to reach their destination. It was just that Esto felt that after arriving, his insides had all been jumbled up. They stopped in front of a large house, where the west-facing window had a display of precious jewelry. In Esto's eyes, they were just colorful pebbles, so he found it very hard to understand why everyone was so crazy about these things. Putting the matter of gems aside, Esto went up and tried knocking on the door. According to the information, the owner of the company lived in this house, but he knocked for what felt like half a day and still got no answer. Even so, Esto had a strong belief that Thompson wouldn't just abandon his home, even though his business had closed. Therefore, he decided to sit tight and wait there until he appeared. Although it was very cold, Esto stubbornly held his ground in front of the man's house, waiting until midnight. When the temperature had dropped to its lowest point, he finally saw Thompson step outside. "Hey kid, you. Are you out of your mind? I thought this cold weather would make you lose heart and go home," even though he was truly freezing. Upon seeing Thompson, Esto was still very happy because catching the guy meant the mission was already halfway successful. It's just that Thompson shooed him away like an evil spirit the moment he saw him. "Just by looking at you, I can guess you were sent by those nobles, right? I'm not selling anything, so go home." Thompson originally intended to go back inside right after saying that, but seeing the struggling state of Esto, who was about to freeze to death, he couldn't bear it. "You can't even stand up right now. Your limbs are trembling and your face is all pale. Hey, I'm just asking, but you're not trying to commit suicide, are you? Has my house now become an ideal spot for suicide?" Thompson even enthusiastically recommended to Esto that 2 blocks away. There was a bridge, and people say the river water there is quite warm, so if he wanted to kill himself, he could choose that spot instead of in front of his house. "Of course, I'm not trying to kill myself," Esto replied weakly. "You're not? Fine then, so why the hell are you sitting outside? Someone else's house? Get lost. Thompson lost all patience, directly pulling Esto up to throw him out. But because of this contact, Esto was able to read his memories. This man, who looked so stern on the outside, was actually weaker on the inside than imagined. He had a beautiful wife named Tin, whom Thompson fell in love with at first sight. Therefore, Tin accepting his marriage proposal was like a dream to him. However, life after marriage was just a long stretch of painful days waiting for the young woman. Their first child passed away right before, celebrating their first birthday, and then the second child, and the third. Tin entered a cycle of getting pregnant and then miscarrying without end. Much later, Tin gave birth to a healthy baby named Leia. The child's cries were loud, carrying Thompson's hopes. But unfortunately, Tin was suffering from depression due to prolonged stress. She believed this baby would also soon follow its siblings. Therefore, she wouldn't even look at the baby. And even after its first birthday, cracks began to form in their marriage. From there, Thompson even knelt and begged his wife, but Tin continued to ignore Leia completely, which was the very reason he closed his company. Thompson dedicated all his time to focusing on caring for his little daughter. Esto knew he didn't have much time to haggle with this man. So after grasping his problem, he immediately offered advice. Thompson, if your wife doesn't want to talk, then just try ignoring her for a while. Thompson was astonished mixed with alarm. He probably couldn't figure out why Esto knew about that, but in this situation, he could only offer the advice he thought was best. If someone doesn't want to face the truth, they won't listen even if you force them. Thompson's reaction was worse than Esto had imagined. He was aggressively grabbed by the collar and thrown straight into the house. After locking the door, Thompson revealed an extremely terrifying face, just as expected. He began to question Esto about how he knew about Tin. Esto's whole body ached, and he tried to calm himself down. To answer Thompson's question, "I am Esto, from Geese," Thompson put a hand to his forehead, cursing endlessly in his mind at the nobles for prying into his private life and even sending a commission all the way to the guild just to bother him. However, looking at Esto, Thompson didn't feel threatened at all. Because he looked so frail, it was as if Ignis had sent their worst member here. Besides, the kid wasn't at fault for any of this, so he suddenly felt a little bit guilty for getting physical with such a weak kid who was also about to freeze from waiting for him for hours outside. Damn it. A bunch of fools blinded by their greed for gemstones. Thompson let out a weary sigh, then extended his hand to Esto. "Forgive me for my rude behavior. That's right, I am the owner of the Jefferson Company." Esto looked from his hand to the ceiling and finally chose to stand up on his own. His hand left hanging in the air made Thompson feel slightly awkward. Ahem. "So, kid from Ignis, what request brings you here?" It was a request for help so that he could reopen his business once again. Esto answered bluntly. "What the?" Thompson thought he had misheard. "The Lord sure is impatient, isn't he?" In any case, this isn't something that can be resolved in just a few words. Thompson then invited him inside, lit some candles, and they had some wine to warm up. After choosing a bottle of wine and chugging a few gulps, his mood finally relaxed a little. To be honest, thinking back on it now, Thompson felt that not only was Esto not threatening, but he also seemed to lack the wits to succeed in his mission. And at a time like this, he should have been trying to get on his good side, but the only thing Esto had done since arriving was stare blankly like a statue. The only thing that made Thompson interested in Esto was that he had mentioned his wife, but frankly, this interest wasn't positive in the slightest, because he hated it when people pried into his private life. Revealing someone's private matters isn't a good thing, you know? When talking about such sensitive topics, you have to be more aware of the situation. "I'm sorry." Esto lowered his head and mumbled. To put it bluntly, he was too naive and childish. Why would the guild send someone like this here? Thompson sighed deeply. Now, he no longer blamed Esto, but he also firmly stated that he had no intention of ever reopening the business. Esto remained silent, not even opening his mouth to ask why. This, in turn, made Thompson wonder, "Aren't you going to ask why?" "Oh, then why did you decide not to reopen the business?" Seeing Thompson's curiosity, Esto asked back mechanically. Thompson burst out laughing. It was the first time he had ever seen a guild member on a mission who was this clueless. Perhaps this was the funniest thing that had happened in days, making Thompson temporarily forget the pressures weighing on his life. Perhaps because he was in a better mood, he proactively told Esto the reason, explaining that he loved his wife and daughter very much. Even if the whole world made him an offer, Thompson had no intention of trading them for anything. The most important thing was that Tin's condition was getting more and more serious. Ever since giving birth to Leah, she wouldn't even leave her room. One time, Thompson tried to force Tin out of the room, which resulted in her choosing the most extreme action of biting her own tongue. Although she was fine that time, the cruel truth was laid bare before Thompson that his wife would rather die than have to see her own daughter. That left him with neither the time nor the state of mind to care about gemstones or his business anymore. As Thompson finished his story, he covered his face and began to cry. Esto was just silent, shocked, because a moment ago, even after reading Thompson's memories, it turned out there were still things he didn't know. Thompson didn't cry. After a long moment, once he composed himself, he wiped away his tears and forced a smile. Anyway, I'm sorry for causing your mission to fail, but I have no intention of reopening this year, so you should tell them to find a source of supply from other companies. Thompson patted Esto's shoulder a few times comfortingly, but a stubborn person like him wasn't about to give up here. If your wife's condition improves, will you agree to reopen? Thompson was about to show him the door, but his steps stopped when he heard those words. Perhaps I can help. After Esto said this, Thompson turned back. I will get your wife to leave her room. Seeing Esto's expression, it didn't look like he was joking, but Thompson wasn't very convinced. If even he couldn't get his wife to leave her room, how could an outsider like Esto possibly manage it? How exactly do you plan to do that? Esto didn't answer. Instead, he slowly approached Thompson and suddenly touched his forehead with 2 fingers. Thompson was startled and confused, about to push Esto's hand away. Just then, a strange voice echoed in his head. Please don't be afraid, I beg of you, sir. Esto is not a bad person. Only Thompson and Esto were there, but that voice wasn't his. Thompson looked down and met Nura's earnest, sparkling eyes, which startled him so much that he stumbled backward. The bottle of wine in Thompson's hand spilled all over. Just now, there was a strange voice in my head. Thompson's face went pale and Esto then slowly walked over, offering a hand to pull him up. Although Thompson didn't know what method he had just used, through this inexplicable event, he was certain this young man was no ordinary person. Thompson reached out and took his hand as a sign of agreement. Afterward, Thompson led Esto and Nura to his wife's room. When he knocked on the door, Esto could clearly see the man's hesitation and caution. His wife's condition had probably caused him a great deal of suffering. My love, it's me. We have a guest today. In response to Thompson, there was only a suffocating silence. He nervously turned the doorknob. As soon as the door opened, Esto could feel a cold wind carrying the chill of snow blowing right at him. Tin was sitting in a chair by the window. Despite the freezing cold, she wore only a thin shirt. From this sight, it was easy to tell the young woman had lost all will to live. Thompson hurried over to close the window. Tin's hand, hanging limply over the chair, was ice cold, which pained him deeply, and her eyes were completely empty and lifeless. She didn't even seem to care when Esto approached. He tried touching Tin's head, but strangely, her mind was completely silent. Esto had never needed to adjust his power to read someone's memories, but it looked like this time he would have to. But when Esto did so, the entire room was suddenly shaken by a dark and gloomy power, causing even a healthy man like Thompson to nearly lose his balance. A gloomy black smoke enveloped the entire room. In an instant, it transported Esto, Nura, and Thompson to another space. It was a lush, peaceful forest. They looked around in all directions, but there was nothing out of the ordinary, until a gentle voice spoke up. Phew, it's so hot. Do I really have to work in the fields in this kind of weather? I really want to take the day off. Thompson's eyes widened in shock. The person before him was his wife. Tin looked completely healthy and normal, not at all like the sick and frail woman from just a moment ago. It seemed Esto hadn't controlled his power well and had entered the deepest layer of her memories. He had also pulled Thompson and Nura in with him. In that memory, Tin looked poor, but her face was still brimming with happiness. Just as the memories Esto had previously probed in Thompson's mind had shown, Tin was the daughter of a poor farming family. Her mother passed away before she was old enough to remember, and after she grew a little older, her father followed her. Beside Tin, only her 2 younger siblings remained, needing care, and so she raised the 2 of them by herself from a young age. Tin worked all sorts of incredibly hard jobs. Fortunately, her 2 siblings were very well behaved, so life was relatively happy, and then Tin fell in love. But the man wasn't Thompson, it was another poor farmer named Johan. The 2 of them were deeply in love, but poverty was like a swamp, drowning their happiness. Tin couldn't provide for the lives of the 3 siblings. Even when she increased her workload, the money still wasn't enough to buy food and medicine for the children. Johan had proposed to her not once, but 3 times. But Tin firmly refused. Their love was immense, but reality was harsh. In the end, Tin and Johan went their separate ways. She went to the city, hoping to get more orders. Then, Tin met Thompson. That was the first time I met Tin. Seeing his wife's memory replayed before his eyes, Thompson couldn't help but be moved. The first time they met, he had fallen face down on the street and was coughing non-stop. Tin was rushing to complete her delivery, but when she saw Thompson was unwell, she still decided to help him to a clinic. When Thompson came to his senses, the first thing that met his eyes was Tin's gentle and beautiful face. He fell for her not long after that. Thompson proposed, and Tin accepted. When she returned to her small house in the suburbs, Johan came to find her, and when he saw the sparkling ruby ring on her hand, Johan nearly went insane. I heard you're getting married? If you're going to leave me, I'll end my own life right here and now. You'll see. As it turned out, Johan wasn't just bluffing, because right after that, he pulled a bottle of pesticide from his pocket. His goal was still to force Tin to come back to him, but she firmly refused, wanting a better future for herself. and her siblings. Perhaps it was because of her cold rejection that Johan actually did something foolish. From then on, Tin always lived with regret and was haunted by the thought that she had been cursed by Johan. This was the first time Thompson had witnessed the deepest memories in his wife's heart. Until now, he had no idea that a man had once loved Tin so deeply, and because of what he had just seen, Thompson became even more devastated, because he believed Tin had only agreed to marry him for his money. Perhaps what he thought was true. After all, she had rejected a poor farmer to be with a man who could give her luxurious gems. Esto's words sounded gentle, but they were like a knife twisting in Thompson's heart. If that's truly the reason, would you change your decision? What did you say? If your wife's decision was influenced by money and poverty, if she coveted the things you have, would she still be one of the two most precious people in the world you once told me about? Esto's question was brutally direct, but Thompson's love for his wife was too great. He didn't even need to think. While still firmly affirming that Tin was the person he cherished most, that she was still Thompson's precious wife, even if the truth was that she was trapped in these painful memories. Tears started streaming down Thompson's face as he remembered the days when Leah was just born. But Tin wouldn't even look at the baby, no matter how hard he pleaded. Thompson, the reality is that your wife is in great agony because she believes that each child she lost was the price for her sins. Thompson's emotions were a complex mix of sadness and pain as he and Esto escaped from Tin's memories. Thompson then slowly approached his wife and knelt on one knee before her, just like the day he had proposed to her several years ago. "Tin, it's not your fault," Thompson whispered as he held his wife's hand tightly. "Leah, our daughter is still alive. She's alive and will be very healthy in the future. She's waiting for you. So please stop blaming yourself and please come back to us." Thompson didn't care about Dawn, nor did he care about his wife's past, and he certainly didn't care if she had married him for money, but he felt there was no reason for her to hurt herself. The only thing Thompson wanted was to overcome all the pain together with his wife, because they were a family. Just then, a bolt of lightning struck the nearby window frame, shattering it in an instant. Thompson reacted instinctively, quickly pulling his wife into an embrace to protect her from harm, and in that moment, Tin's eyes seemed to regain their vitality. The sudden change in his wife left Thompson both astonished and moved, and right after, a loud cry came from the baby's room next door. Tin shot to her feet before Thompson's astonished eyes. "Lee," she called out as she bolted away. For the first time in her life, Tin held her little daughter Leah, endlessly apologizing for not being there for her all this time. This sudden turn of events brought immense happiness to Thompson. "The baby's hungry, you can tell just by her cries." He handed his wife a baby bottle. "You must be hungry too, right? We have chicken soup at home. Thank you." Thompson joyfully embraced his wife and daughter. Their family of three finally had a happy ending. As for Esto, perhaps because he had used too much of his power earlier, his body was completely exhausted. After Thompson and Tin ran to the baby's room, he could no longer hold on and collapsed to the floor. Esto was Thompson's benefactor, so of course, he couldn't just leave him there. So, in the dead of night, the couple took him to the most famous apothecary in the region. Esto was burning with fever and unconscious, and after an examination, the physician was at a loss because he believed Esto's problems stemmed from his abilities, which was something beyond his expertise. Moreover, there were no apothecaries in this area that could treat ability users. The old physician thought this happened because Esto had never lost control of his abilities before. For now, getting proper rest should be enough, and then they could request help depending on the situation. The couple looked at each other. Tin kept looking at Nura, then back at her husband. Nura was sitting at the head of the bed, her worried gaze fixed on Esto. Thompson thought for a moment before daring to speak, because it was Nura who had burst into the baby's room to tell them that Esto had just fainted. This was the first time Thompson had ever seen a white-furred monkey that could talk, and he was still in shock. Leah is still at home, so we have to go back first. I'll pay for the medical treatment, so don't worry, and if you need any help, just come find me." Nura nodded, and then suddenly she remembered the most important reason she came here with Sto. "What about the commission?" Thompson looked at his wife with a trusting, bright smile, so he had already made a decision. "The commission was a request for me to reopen the company, right? Since Sto is our benefactor, I will of course agree. After all, my wife's heart has been healed, so you don't need to worry anymore. I'll leave this fellow to you then." At this point, Nura was finally relieved. The Thompson couple also returned to their home, leaving only her constantly watching over the sickbed, looking extremely worried and anxious. On the morning of the third day, Esto finally woke up. The first thing that met his eyes was Nura's tear-filled gaze. She couldn't control her emotions and immediately jumped onto the bed to hug him. After confirming he was stable, Esto asked the old physician for permission to return. After all, being bedridden for 2 whole days was more than enough for him. They returned to Gilsul, and the reward for the successful commission had also been sent. This time it was 5 whole coins. Hack was so happy his eyes crinkled into a smile. He had supported many ability users with his own 2 hands, but this was the first time Hack had seen a member achieve such good results as Sto, who had only just joined the guild a short time ago. Currently, Sto is the cash cow of Ignis, and his reputation is so good that it has even reached the ears of the nobles in the neighboring city. After Sto recovered, another problem arose. He received a second commission from the Fabian family. This time, it was personally requested by Fabian, but the letter didn't specify the details of the commission. Even so, Esto had no way to refuse, as he didn't want to displease the nobility, so he had to take Nura with him to that mansion once again. As soon as Esto entered, Hiru rushed out to greet him. It seemed the child had missed Sto a lot since they last met. Serlin also hurried out, and upon seeing the envelope in Esto's hand, the girl immediately realized her father had summoned him. "I'm very happy to see you again. What about you, Esto?" Esto was taken aback by Serlin's question. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. Well, it's not that. It's not good." Serlin was not satisfied and lunged forward to pinch his cheek. "Huh? Not that it's not good? So does that mean it's good or not? Are you happy to see me again or not? Aren't you afraid I can read other people's hearts?" Esto didn't answer but asked back. Ever since the last time he was treated rudely by the young master of the Fabian house, he had always felt unhappy. Coming here today, Esto also felt very awkward, but Serlin was completely different from her brother. The girl wasn't scared at all, nor did she resent Sto's ability, because she believed he would not go around spreading her secrets, and he would never try to control her feelings, because in Serlin's eyes, Esto was a super kind person. Their conversation was interrupted by the mansion's butler. This scout was eagerly waiting to see Esto. Serlin pouted, but she couldn't go against her father's wishes. All right, but you have to come see me before you leave. Don't you dare sneak off, you hear?" Esto nodded in agreement with the girl and then followed the butler's guidance to the master's room. This was already waiting for him. Before he could even greet him, this scout asked a seemingly unrelated question. "Tell me, do you know about cacti?" "No, sir," Esto replied. "How can a green plant grow in a desert? A place with no water? Isn't that miraculous? Being plants, it's not that they don't need any water, but if they are watered like normal plants, they will rot." This scout began to ramble on about the cactus, finally concluding that if the owner doesn't know its value, they would easily kill the plant. Esto knew that he wasn't just talking about the cactus in front of him. Can you read its thoughts? This scout brought the cactus in front of Esto, but he had never read a plant's thoughts, nor had he ever believed plants had thoughts like animals. Yet after using a bit more of his power, Esto heard a curse. Damn it, why won't this old geezer shut up? Esto tried to contain his surprise. The cactus in this scout's hand could actually think, and moreover, it was furiously cursing him. And just as Esto suspected, this scout didn't seek him out just to chat about this plant. "Esto, a cactus doesn't have a choice, but you yourself have the right to choose the master who will support you." It was very clear. This scout was trying to recruit Esto to his side, promising him a position where no one in this house would dare disrespect him, and the only person he would have to obey was him. At the same time, he would receive the highest privileges as a commoner. Esto guessed that he coveted his mind-reading ability, and in fact, he had guessed right on the money. This scout didn't even bother to hide that thought, demanding that Esto read the minds of the people he designated. "Kid, don't believe him, it's a trap." Those are the words of a master manipulator. Before Esto could even speak, he heard the screaming thoughts of the cactus in this scout's hand. He himself had no intention of accepting this offer. Although he didn't want to antagonize a nobleman, this scout's intentions seemed anything but good. "Thank you very much for your offer, sir, but I am satisfied with my current job," Esto replied. And his answer made the old man burst out laughing. To think about it, it seems there's a misunderstanding here. This is an order. To change his tune so quickly, he was clearly not a good person. Esto tried to remain calm. He frankly asked this scout what would happen if he disobeyed his order. "For now, nothing yet, but bad things will surely find their way to you." It was clearly a threat. Esto was just a 19-year-old commoner. How could he not be afraid of a threat from a world-wise nobleman? However, he still managed to keep his composure until the end. Esto bowed his head respectfully, then told this scout that if he wanted him to change jobs, he would have to discuss it with Gil first. Esto's complete unwillingness, however, pleased this scout. If he had agreed instantly, it would have proven he wasn't trustworthy, and he wouldn't have dared to use him. This scout then retracted his intimidating demeanor and said he would give Esto some more time to think about where his true home was. After that, he handed the cactus to the butler and told him to throw it away. "Get rid of this thing. I'll replace this picky plant with a beautiful flower." Esto could hear the cactus screaming frantically. "What? Where do you think you're touching me? Huh? You bastard. Are you throwing me away? You bastard. Let me go. You damn human." The butler then conveniently led Esto out. Along the way, he could constantly hear the desperate screams of the plant, so Esto boldly asked to take it home. After all, they were just planning to throw it away anyway since it had no flowers, and its stem was covered in thorns. Besides, it's very difficult to care for. Do you really want it? But who's to say it will never bloom? Seeing Esto's determination, the butler handed the plant over to him, then he asked Esto to wait around for a moment. He was to wait at the mansion, because Lady Serlin also wanted to see him. After the butler left, the plant in Esto's hands wouldn't stop trembling. It seemed to be afraid, thinking he would throw it away too, so Esto had to speak up to reassure it. I won't hurt you, and I won't burn or throw you away. However, this is my first time seeing a cactus, so I don't know what kind of temperature is best for you. Just tell me directly when you're thirsty, okay? The plant in Esto's hand immediately went still. Esto continued, I can hear your voice, so just let me know if you're uncomfortable anywhere. Esto was met with only silence. It seemed the plant in his hands was shocked that a human could understand its thoughts. A moment later, it finally spoke in shock. Whoa, are you a god? How can you hear my voice? Esto named the plant Ahu, because the name it gave for itself was ridiculously long. Nura, who had been watching him talk to himself, realized he was speaking to the plant in his hands, and so she couldn't help but applaud enthusiastically. Esto can talk to plants now? That's so awesome. Even though it was just a simple compliment, Nura's look of amazement made Esto feel very happy, as if he had just accomplished something truly great. He then introduced Ahu to her. The two of them seemed to get along instantly, despite being different species and unable to speak the same language. Ahu also grew very fond of Esto, and even the thorns on its body became much softer around him. Even though I can't move my body freely yet, I can at least control my thorns so they don't hurt Esto. You can't move yet? Esto asked, puzzled. That's right, you didn't know? If we cacti live long enough, or become strong enough, we can move our bodies at will. Even though I'm still young, my willpower is strong, so at least I can control my thorns. Esto filed away this bizarre piece of information. He wanted to talk more with Ahu, but while he was waiting for Saralyn, more trouble appeared. Young Master Jeremy showed up, looking just as unpleasant as ever, and spotted him. Didn't I tell you to get lost and never show your face here again? Is your memory that bad? Or do you think my words are a joke? Huh, you lowly commoner. Compared to their last encounter, Jeremy's words were even harsher. He repeatedly insulted Esto, calling him a lowly commoner, and called Nura an ugly monster. Yet he still wanted to buy her, for the simple reason that Nura was a monster who could understand human speech. He also ridiculed Esto for muttering to a plant all this time. This infuriated Ahu. What's this? Another one of those all-brawn, no-brains idiots? Nura is not merchandise. Esto was furious with Jeremy's arrogant attitude, but the jerk was incredibly persistent. How clever. Since you can read my mind, I guess the negotiations are over, right? Just take it. With that, he took out 10 gold coins, but Esto simply repeated that Nura was not merchandise to be bought and sold. Jeremy assumed that he was just trying to haggle for more money, but Esto firmly stated that he would never sell Nura. This attitude, Esto's defiance, made his eyes burn with rage. G-Man was incredibly annoyed that a lowly peasant like Esto would dare to disrespect a noble like him. Hey, I was holding back from punching your face in, but instead you ignore my warning and hang around my house. What the hell is that? Esto tried to explain that he was only here at the invitation of Viscount Fabian, but of course, Gemin didn't believe him. He aggressively lunged forward and grabbed Esto's collar, and compared to a rich young master who had trained with the sword since childhood, a frail, skinny kid like him was obviously no match. Just as Gemin was about to really punch Esto's lights out, Nura couldn't take it anymore and screamed, "Don't you bully Esto!" Gemin was astonished and let go. He knew this white-furred monkey could understand human speech, but he never expected it could actually speak it too. His greed flared up intensely, and Jaman said he would pay Esto 30 gold coins to buy Nura outright, but this time he gave him no right to refuse. Instead, Gemin ordered the nearby guards to capture Nura and take it to the livestock pen. I already said I'm not selling, Esto shouted defiantly, his voice several times louder than Jaman's. He trembled with rage because this was the first time in his entire life that a commoner had yelled so loudly at his face like that. Esto was surrounded by 4 of the Fabian family's knights. They wanted to forcefully seize Nura, but they had no idea that they were playing with fire. Esto could endure it, but Nura itself could not, and it finally attacked first. The monkey's sharp claws swiped across, instantly crippling one of the knights' arms. All that remained in the grand hall was a piercing scream, and the remaining knights took a fearful step back. Jaman's anger soared to its peak. Just then, a few more men ran over, and he pointed straight at Esto, ordering them to capture and imprison him for the reason of attempting to murder him. Esto's heart went cold, and so did Nura's. Jaman called it a monster, while his own actions were more cruel than any monster's. At the young master's command, the knights immediately threw a large net over Nura's body. Then they drew their swords and began to attack. The knights' laughter and their actions officially drove Nura insane. Even though it had followed Esto for some time and willingly wore a collar, its wild instincts were still incredibly strong. Jimin was frightened by Nura's roar and staggered back a few steps, and at that moment, the Viscount had been alerted by the commotion and came downstairs. What is all this ruckus? The moment Jimin saw his father, he was overjoyed, but before he could even play the victim, the Viscount rushed over and grabbed him by the shoulders and chewed him out. You fool, that thing was supposed to be in my grasp, but you had to interfere and ruin everything. What do you mean, father? Jiman was shocked not only because his father was scolding him so harshly, but also because he was being scolded over a commoner. Shut up, you idiot. The Viscount disgustedly tossed his precious son aside, then ordered the knights to clean up the scene. He ordered the soldiers to capture Esto alive and to deal with Nura as they saw fit. The knights accompanying the Viscount were much harder to deal with because they knew how to use magic. Nura was immediately at a disadvantage and whispered an apology to Esto. "Nura is sorry, Esto. I just wanted to be with you. Don't be sorry, you did nothing wrong." Nura's eyes filled with sadness and despair, and as those knights began to use magic, it knew that no matter how much bigger it got, it would never be able to win. Nura closed her eyes, accepting the worst outcome for herself, when a massive explosion occurred, shaking the entire mansion's grand hall. Jeremy just clicked his tongue in mock pity, thinking if you had just taken the money from the start, things wouldn't have come to this. Thick smoke and dust enveloped the room, and after it finally cleared, the Fabian father and son were stunned to see Esto, still standing there alive and well, without even a single scratch. The ones who need to apologize aren't Nura, it's you. The knights were also astonished by his incredible resilience, and on Viscount Fabian's command, they began to charge and attack Esto. But unfortunately, not a single one of them could harm him. Why? Because even though Esto had no muscles and a scrawny body, he possessed the incredible power of mind control. One soldier had his sword raised to strike but was forced by Esto's control to turn the blade and stab himself instead. The Fabian father and son could only watch, mouths agape in shock. All the remaining soldiers were also brought under Esto's control, simultaneously dropping their weapons and kneeling at his feet. Esto's face remained as cold as ice, completely devoid of expression. "Father, brother," a young, tearful voice cried out. Esto then noticed that Cerulean had appeared on the staircase at some point. The little girl saw Esto, with his face covered in blood, surrounded by soldiers lying scattered on the floor. This overly violent scene caused Cerulean to faint, right on the spot. Viscount Fabian rushed to catch her, then questioned Esto in the tone of a victim. "Now, are you satisfied? Look around you. Does this place need any more bloodshed?" Esto knew full well that the fault was not his. He didn't want to hold himself back anymore either. Since childhood, he always had to suppress himself because of this power that made people think he was cursed, but that didn't make Esto's life any easier and only led to him being beaten and ostracized for 19 years. Now, having just escaped that miserable life, he was suppressing himself again to let Nura be bullied by others. Esto didn't want to endure it any longer, but perhaps the current situation should stop. "Here, I won't attack anyone else. In return, let's just pretend nothing ever happened here." Viscount Fabian felt this was an audacious demand, but before he could speak, the troublemaker Jeremy, lying in the corner, screamed loudly. "You vile beast, you murderer! After causing all this, you dare ask us to act like nothing happened." Esto turned and shot Jeremy a look that was enough to make him tremble. Then he mimicked Viscount Fabian's tone and said, "This isn't a request, it's a command." Jeremy trembled with rage, but truly, aside from gritting his teeth, there was nothing else he could do. In the end, both he and Viscount Fabian fainted from the overwhelming power of Esto's mind control. Suki also appeared just in time, as always showing up when Esto needed it most, because he couldn't carry Nura back on his own, so Suki transformed back into a tiger and carried her on its back. "You get on too," Suki urged. "But that'll be too tiring for you, Suki. I can just walk. Carrying you too won't make a big difference. Just get on." Esto couldn't refuse any longer and had to climb onto Suki's back. In truth, after using his powers all this time, his whole body was completely exhausted. Esto held on tightly to Nura and Suki as the tiger leaped and shot away from the port Fabian mansion. Suki carried Esto and Nura through the dark streets, with Nura unconscious and Esto feeling incredibly sad. Even though he knew Suki wasn't the type to confide in, right now, besides pouring his heart out to it, Esto didn't know where else to seek comfort. "Hey Suki, what do you think? It seems I really am a monster, aren't I?" Esto's mind was in utter turmoil, because earlier, he hadn't just read others' thoughts, he had controlled them, causing those soldiers to end their own lives. Thinking about the main hall of the Fabian mansion, filled with the stench of blood, others would probably faint from fear. But strangely, Esto felt nothing at all. Even though he knew what he did was wrong, he felt no fear or sadness. This made Esto feel that he and the concept of a monster were becoming very close. "So what?" Suki didn't answer but asked back, "If it were me, I would have taken all of their lives." Suki bluntly criticized Esto for being soft-hearted, because to it, there was no reason to fear or pity those who had harmed him and threatened to take away what he cherished. But in the end, I was the one who ended up harming others. Esto was still feeling down. Still feeling depressed? Well, I guess you can be a little sad. After all, you didn't mean to hurt anyone. A her, who had been listening to the conversation from Esto's arms, got antsy and decided to chime in with its own opinion. Ahur found Esto ridiculous for doubting whether he was a monster when he was clearly a person of flesh and blood. And even if he really were a monster, it wouldn't harm world peace. As long as Esto didn't use his abilities to hurt others, it would be fine. The bluntness of a plant left Esto stunned. But it was unclear if he had become less insecure about himself after this. After all, the label of a monster and his dark past. had followed him for 19 long years, a feeling that couldn't be shaken off so easily. Suki didn't rush them back to Gil. A few days later, the Ignis branch was in complete chaos. A bird-headed man named Fabian brought some news. It was an emergency summons for Esto from the headquarters, which drove Hack crazy. This meant the royal family had put pressure on Gil's headquarters, or someone at the main office considered Esto a dangerous ability user. Rosalie also had a major headache. This summons was one problem, but the most important issue was that ever since accepting the commission from Viscount Fabian, Esto had been missing for 10 days. Moreover, a rumor had recently been spreading around the mansion that the Fabian family had been attacked by a young man and a white-furred monkey. Despite this, Hack firmly believed that Esto wasn't the type of person to harm others like that. Just when the two were at their most confused, Esto returned. Hack looked at him in his tattered and torn state, with dried bloodstains on his face and body, and couldn't help but be bewildered. But in the end, he still reached out and patted Esto's shoulder with a proud look. "You did well." Esto asked about his mission progress, but Hack said he'd have to file a report anyway, so they could skip it for now. "Do you have any idea how worried we were when we suddenly lost contact with you?" Hack chided, while Rosalie at the side nodded her head vigorously. Fabian cleared his throat repeatedly from behind, so Hack had to temporarily cut short the 2,000-word sentimental reunion. Suddenly, he noticed that Nura wasn't sticking by Esto's side as usual. Esto explained that it was injured and was resting to recover. "Thankfully, the injuries aren't too serious. You should rest for 3 days. You can submit the mission report later." Hack tried to push Fabian aside to instruct Esto, but even if he treated the boy like a golden goose to be protected, Fabian wasn't going to let this slide so easily. If Hack couldn't say it, then he would say it himself. Fabian appeared before Esto looking like an angel, but the news he brought him was not good at all. As expected, Esto had to follow him to the guild's headquarters immediately. Hack still wanted to resist, but Esto obediently agreed. Ignis was his livelihood, and he had no intention of quitting this job yet, and as long as he was in the guild, refusing a decision from headquarters was not wise at all, so he had no choice but to say goodbye to Hack, feeling very sorry. Along the way, Esto kept leaning his head against the carriage window, his sad expression making him look like he'd lost his last friend. Ahu suddenly chirped up, saying it had figured out Esto's most serious problem, which was that he was very bad at refusing people and he was also way too obedient. If you don't want to, just say no. If you hate it, just say you hate it. It's that simple. Why can't you say it, dude? This plant was 4 times noisier than a living creature like Nura. Esto shot at a judgmental look, but he couldn't open his mouth to reply because Fabian was still sitting opposite him. However, because Ahu was so loud, Esto finally had to blurt out, "Be quiet." Then Ahu replied irritably. Fabian was astonished. He knew that the be quiet wasn't meant for him, so was Esto just communicating with a plant. When Fabian voiced this suspicion, Esto didn't deny it at all. He thought Fabian would be like everyone else, shocked and thinking he was a monster. In reality, Fabian was shocked, but his shock leaned more towards excitement. "Wow, that's amazing," he exclaimed in awe. "I heard you have mind-reading abilities. Can you read what I'm thinking right now? Why on earth is there someone so eager to have their mind read like this guy?" He had intended to just remain silent, but just then, Nura, who was lying next to him, suddenly stirred and a barrage of Fabian's thoughts immediately hit Esto's mind, giving him a splitting headache. "Whoa, this is so cool and so scary. They say white-furred monkeys are beasts, so what if I get eaten?" Esto began to flawlessly recite what was in Fabian's head with a deadpan voice. "Whoa, he can really read my mind. I shouldn't have asked, should I? I'm so embarrassed. Okay, that's enough. I'm sorry." Fabian started to panic, even though Esto had only read a small snippet. It was enough to prove that his ability was the real deal. He didn't dare to be curious anymore. Just then, Nura also woke up, and despite still being injured, it saw Esto's tired state and pulled him to lean on its shoulder to rest. Nura's soft fur and body gave off an indescribably pleasant feeling. This scene made Fabian ponder for a moment. "Looking at you guys like this, you seem just like a family, don't you?" Night fell, and the carriage continued on its way. Fabian prepared a thin blanket and pillow for Esto. Along the way, he was constantly worried that the boy would be cold or uncomfortable. "Do you want another blanket? If you're hungry or uncomfortable in any way, just let me know, okay?" "This is comfortable enough, thank you," Esto replied. It wasn't that he was being polite, but rather that Fabian could never imagine just how difficult a life he had previously lived in an attic. Therefore, even if the blanket was a bit thin, and even if the carriage swayed continuously, Esto didn't feel uncomfortable at all. They traveled a bit further when the sky began to Fabian was fast asleep, even snoring with his mouth open. Nura also suddenly woke up in a state of panic. Esto thought it was woken up by the other guy's snoring, but that wasn't it. Its sharp beastly intuition was signaling danger, letting Nura know that something was gathering around the carriage. It wasn't human, nor was it an animal, but it gave Nura a very bad feeling that this thing was here to take their lives. Sure enough, not long after, the coachman burst open the door, looking utterly terrified. We're in big trouble. We've been completely surrounded by a flock of monsters. Avian immediately woke up, but still looked very sleepy. Surrounded? How many enemies are there? Can we escape? Well, they're all harpies with very high combat power. As soon as the coachman finished speaking, Avian's expression quickly turned grim. Harpies are monsters that normally only appear when winter comes, yet here they were, surrounding them. Moreover, it wasn't just one, but a whole flock. The driver said that even if they broke through the encirclement, it would be very difficult to escape, because these monsters are much faster than horses. Let Nura go out and check. Even though Nura hadn't fully recovered, it eagerly volunteered to rush to the front lines. Esto intended to stop it, but before he could do anything, Nura had already dashed out of the carriage door. The rain was getting heavier, and Esto grew restless inside the carriage. Hey, letting your ally fight alone is a bit. The driver glanced meaningfully at Avian, but the young man immediately protested, saying that although he was an ability user, he actually had no combat skills. Rushing out now would only make him a stumbling block and be of no help at all. As for Esto, he couldn't just leave Nura alone. Avian wanted to stop him because he thought Esto's ability wasn't suited for combat either, but Esto never intended to use brute force to fight them anyway. Esto's eyes were as cold as ice, making Avian tremble for a moment. What? If he's not going to fight, then is he planning to use that white-furred monkey as food for the harpies? At this thought, Avian couldn't sit still any longer and hurriedly rushed out of the carriage. Even though he had no combat ability, Avian's knowledge was very extensive. He had to give Esto a few warnings. The harpy beast is known for being extremely vicious, and when they attack in a flock, their danger level increases even more. They are not an enemy you can face with your destructive power alone. Esto, please listen to me. This won't end just by taking down a few of them. Meanwhile, Nura was fiercely attacking the harpies. Avian knew that, but he still thought they should flee before they were slaughtered. While he was busy trying to convince Esto, a harpy suddenly dived down from above. Avian's entire body froze, as he had absolutely no real combat experience. He couldn't even manage to run away. In the end, it was Esto who rushed forward to take the fatal blow for Avian. The harpy's beak pecked straight into his left shoulder. The deep wound began to bleed profusely. Esto used his ability to control the beast's mind, preventing it from attacking any further. But the most concerning thing was that the smell of his blood had attracted all the harpies in the area to gather here. Meanwhile, Nura was still using its brute strength to take down one opponent after another. The only thing that scared it was that Esto was bleeding. Even though he said he was fine, how could Nura not be panicked? Even so, he couldn't get to his side because the swarm of harpies, as numerous as ants, attacked in wave after wave. To be honest, Esto wasn't really confident he would win because he didn't know if he could use his ability on multiple targets at once. But regardless, if he did nothing, he would just become the enemy's prey. So when the flock of harpies swooped down to attack, Esto took a risk and stood still, and the atmosphere became completely silent. A group of harpies indeed stopped and hovered in the air, and in that moment, Esto truly debated whether or not to take their lives. But in the end, he chose to be a good person. Go back to your nests. The harpies flapped their wings again, but they turned around and flew back. This sight made Avian's jaw drop in astonishment. In his entire life, this was the first time he had ever seen monsters obey a human's command. Esto's test had succeeded, and the danger was eliminated. He and Nura returned to the carriage, leaving only a bewildered Avian standing there. The harpies had vanished without a trace, their recent attack feeling like a dream. Esto ended this threat far too easily. Now Avian understood why headquarters had issued an urgent summons to track him down at all costs. Even though Esto had a gentle face and didn't emit a single hint of killing intent to make one feel threatened. But after this incident, Avian was convinced he was the most dangerous ability user in the world. Night had fallen. With the moon hanging high, a carriage sped down the road. Esto was lying inside when a voice suddenly spoke. "You're so troublesome." His eyes were shut tight, then they suddenly snapped open. Suki said to him, "Do you always have to act on your own? This is why I hate humans." They looked down and continued, "Get some sleep, and stop running around like an idiot getting bitten by monsters again." Esto opened his eyes slightly and said, "Sorry." Suki, while adjusting his blanket, replied, "Don't be sorry. If you just stayed out of trouble, you wouldn't have to apologize in the first place." Esto fell silent. Suki turned their back to him and said, "Esto, don't get hurt again." The carriage passed through a region of snow-covered hills. Ahu suddenly stretched. "What a wonderful morning." He looked weakly at Ahu and asked, "What are you doing?" It replied, "Greetings." Immediately after, bundles of roots shot out from the bottom of the pot and ran towards him, prompting him to ask, "You can walk?" Ahu walked across the table and said, "Ah," surprised to wake up and find a walking Ahu running around. Ahu continued, "I'm shocked too." Nura looked at Ahu and asked, "You can walk?" Then, she pointed at its cactus spines and added, "Congratulations." Ahu also excitedly replied, "Thank you, thank you." Parker shot up and asked, "What the hell?" When he saw Nura and the cactus laughing happily together, he smiled and exclaimed, "Your friend is pretty unusual, huh?" Then, he thought to himself, "Huh, But what's so strange about a walking cactus anyway? After all, that guy can repel a whole flock of harpies with just a single word. Red monsters with 2 pairs of horns flew in the sky, surrounding a young man walking on the grass. The harpies quickly flew away as he approached. Parker thought again, if he's the main character, I wouldn't even be surprised if he could befriend a dragon. The ability to read hearts and dominate others is truly amazing. Parker asked a question. Then Esto replied, those are your wings. He laughed and said, ahaha, I guess I should say thanks, huh? The carriage suddenly stopped in front of a snow-covered pine forest where Esto was sitting. He met Nura with some bread and thought, that reminds me. Ahu was trotting nearby, so he suddenly asked, Ahu, do you need any water? Ahu immediately replied, no, I'm full of water. Seeing this, Nura asked, you've eaten already? Ahu replied, not exactly, it's just that yesterday when Esto was injured. Esto lowered his head and mumbled, Then Ahu continued, didn't you bleed a lot? Your skin. White skin had blood dripping down it, and right after that, the blood fell onto Ahu. It then said, your blood? I drank a little of it. Then it giggled inanely. You drank my blood? Yeah. Ahu replied cheerfully, uh-huh. Esto had a calm expression, but didn't know what to say, and he suddenly explained in a panic, don't misunderstand. I couldn't move back then, and I didn't do it on purpose either. The blood just happened to fall on it. And then, Ahu suddenly bloomed and continued. I also bloomed for the first time. Nura looked at Ahu with a gentle expression. Then he said, how interesting. A flower that blooms after drinking a person's blood. Parker chimed in, wait a minute, you should be focusing on the fact that a normal plant drank your blood and can now walk, right? Ahu bloomed, bowing its head on his hand, and said, this is a fruit. Please accept my sincerity. Esto gently held Ahu in his hands and said, thank you. Ahu triumphantly laughed. Then it continued, you're the one who should be thankful. Suddenly, one of Ahu's petals fell onto his arm, and immediately, that spot began to decay, leaving behind black marks that gradually faded away. Esto cried out sadly, the flower dissolved. Ahu then said sadly, my fruit. Next, it said, Esto, look at the light on your shoulder. Esto was surprised, and countless question marks appeared in his head. Esto looked at the wound on his shoulder, then he placed a hand on it and thought about something. Suddenly, a piece of black cloth along with a white string appeared. Esto sat back in his seat and said, this flower seems to have the ability to heal. Ahu exclaimed excitedly, isn't that great? Then a voice called out, Nura. Hey Nura, it cried out upon hearing the voice. Anyway, that person continued, Suki came to visit us last night, right? Nura looked up and replied, you're both right and wrong. The black cat lay on the seat, curled up like a fluffy pillow in a nightlight. That person continued, Suki has been on the carriage with us since last night. After finishing getting dressed, Esto still thought, so it wasn't a dream. His hand reached out to grab something yellow and held it up high. He stood up, leaning back slightly, when the blue-haired guy cried out, what are you doing? It's dangerous on a moving carriage. Esto continued, Suki, I know you're there. Esto's hand reached up to grab onto the roof of the carriage. The black cat suddenly appeared and meowed. Seeing this, Esto said, it's dangerous up here. Go back inside. However, Suki remained on the roof of the carriage. It walked majestically and said, it seems you're in a situation more dangerous than I am. Suki suddenly leaped to another spot, to Esto's surprise. Then it sat majestically before his eyes. Just then, as he returned to his seat, someone suddenly asked, a cat? Parker scratched his head and asked, is that your cat? Esto? Suki yawned and a voice explained, no, Suki isn't a pet with an owner, huh? It's not a stray cat either. Parker then thought, so they're friends? As Suki climbed onto the seat next to Esto, it asked, who's that idiot? He immediately replied, this is Parker. Suki then curled up on his lap and asked, are you okay with your injury? Esto replied, yeah, Ahu helped me heal it. Suki asked again, what can that tiny little Ahu do? Ahu quickly ran over to where Suki was lying as Esto's eyes filled with a gentle expression. He said, it has healing powers. If you're going to follow me anyway. Suki replied, I'm not following you. I just happened to find you injured while you were out exploring. Esto patted Suki's head and continued, why don't you follow me from now on? Suki suddenly wagged its tail, and Esto hugged it tightly. Its face flushed red, pampered and cuddly as the carriage sped along the steep road. The black cat continued, let me make this clear. I'm only going with you because you told me to. How can you always get hurt by chance whenever I'm not around? Esto smiled and said, yeah, thank you. Suki peeked open one eye when his hand suddenly touched its head. It closed both its eyes and thought, Esto has changed. I don't care how he's changed, but this kind of change isn't so bad. The carriage continued to roll on, and Esto turned to look in another direction when someone called his name. A red mirror suddenly appeared up ahead, and someone said, we've arrived at the teleportation gate connected to the headquarters. Esto and Suki slowly approached the gate, while Bearer held a piece of paper and said, Para and Esto from the Ignis Guild. You can just bill the guild for the fee. The person at the counter said, yes, that's been confirmed. For security reasons, the gate can only be used 3 times a day per adult. Esto's gaze remained fixed on the gate. The cashier continued, you may also experience some side effects after using the gate, and if you've accepted these conditions, we will open the entrance for you. A man's footstep was heard, and Esto slowly moved closer to the gate. He squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them wide, and before him stood a large castle. Just as Esto stepped through, Bearer also arrived along with Nura. He thought, so this is the guild's main headquarters. Bearer smiled cheerfully and said, welcome, Esto. This is the main headquarters of the Ignis Guild. On the outside, it was a tall building with an ancient architectural style. Everyone began to ascend a spiral staircase. Bearer looked up at the higher floors as he walked. Meanwhile, Esto thought to himself, an endless spiral staircase, like an ascent to heaven. Does heaven really exist up there in the sky? A man held a glass of reddish gold wine, those with power and wealth. People constantly praise that person and their supporters. Esto looked up and thought, will it be better the higher I go? Esto silently continued to climb without saying another word. Bearer looked back at him and said, we've arrived. Time really flies. Para added, this is a magic staircase. It's quite similar to a teleportation gate. Anyway, you were supposed to meet the guild master, but they've been away for nearly 3 months now, so naturally, you'll have to meet Waleski. A man prepared to approach the closed door, his hand reaching forward and touched a button on it. Para fell silent and knocked gently on the door. All 3 of them focused their attention there, and Para scratched his head and said, it seems Waleski has gone to sleep again. Esto wondered aloud, asleep? Para's hand kept knocking on the door. Suddenly, the door creaked open, revealing an empty space. Ahu, in Esto's hand, was sucked in by a powerful force, and both Para and Esto were taken by surprise. The dragon anxiously said, hey, my head almost flew off just now. What kind of treatment is this? Esto immediately thought, where's the dragon's skull? A hand grabbed the sword and yelled, ah, damn it. The orange-haired man yawned and asked, who is it? His eyes widened and his brows furrowed as he looked forward. Waleski looked at Para and said, I don't think I ordered any chicken, did I? Para shouted angrily. How many times do I have to tell you, Waleski, I'm not food? Ahu exclaimed, so that's him. Speaking of which, Para said, I brought a guest here. Waleski spoke again. A guest? What guest? Baser immediately replied, your guest. Waleski placed a hand on his stomach and said, what nonsense is this? Why should I have to see a guest? Isn't there anyone working downstairs? I'm going to dock your pay for waking me up from a good sleep so early in the morning. Baser angrily yelled at Waleski, turned to leave and told him to go back. Suddenly, a cat's meow rang out and Waleski's eyes lit up as he asked, a cat? Suki, sitting on the ground, let out another meow. Waleski crouched down and praised it. Wow, you're so pretty. Are you a guest too? Just as he reached out his hand, Suki immediately turned away, walking over to another person standing nearby. Suddenly, someone said, he is the one replacing the special support position of the Gallia branch. Esto was standing there holding Ahu in his arms, while Waleski was still crouching down, and said, so he's the guest? Then he continued, you brought our guild's leader here. Waleski stood frozen for a moment, then extended his hand and introduced himself. I'm Waleski of Ignis. Their hands clasped in a firm handshake, and he said, so I finally met the rumored leader? Esto was stunned, but only thought to himself, leader? Waleski puffed out his chest and continued, humph. Well, come on in. He simply replied, thank you. Inside was a messy room with clothes scattered everywhere, and upon seeing it, Ahu immediately asked, isn't this a pigsty? Nura tilted its head to one side and said, if Nezu had to walk on the floor, Nezu would have to step on all that stuff to get around. Waleski quickly strode forward and replied, it's fine, it's fine. He stepped on a stack of books and said, I don't care what you step on. Ah, but Waleski flashed a confident smile, like he was in a toothpaste ad, and said, that little white monkey friend of yours speaks quite fluently. Huh. So it can talk to people? Nura immediately asked, huh, how did you know? Waleski replied, just a guess. He continued, just kidding. If I were an animal, and I looked up to cry out K. He gave a faint smile, figuring the monkey wouldn't want to tell a human how it can talk. Esto watched Waleski and Nura chatting together and silently assessed. He's completely different on the inside from how he appears on the outside. Suddenly, Waleski looked up and asked Esto if he wanted some coffee. When Esto heard that, he immediately refused, and the man once again rubbed his chin and continued, pardon me, you're probably not old enough yet to appreciate the taste of bitter things. Maybe a Coke would be better. Esto stood frozen and thought, that's not why I refused it. A tray of drinks was brought to the table, and beside a cup of steaming hot liquid was a plate of delicious cookies. Esto lowered his head, cradling the cup in his hands, when Waleski's voice suddenly rang out. It seems our new leader is quite young, huh? Esto's reply made him laugh out loud. I've already had my coming-of-age ceremony. He continued, that's exactly why I said you're young. When adults get called young, they don't deny it, they say thank you. Baser said worriedly, Waleski heard him, raised the cup to his mouth, and asked, what is it? Baser continued, you sound just like a creep who enjoys teasing children, so knock it off. Waleski leaned back in his chair with a mocking laugh and said, let's get down to business. That was the guild master's intention in summoning a leader from the main headquarters. After all, Esto replied, I see, but why am I? Before he could finish, Waleski interrupted, the leader part? That was the guild master's idea too. I'm just the messenger. Originally, the leader title was just a newly added designation, so I'm not exactly sure what it is either. Baser's face started to look worried, while Esto listened on calmly. Suddenly, his hand holding the cup trembled slightly as he thought, could it be? Is the guild a trustworthy place? Their position and attitude are too secretive, and their stance changes often. Despite that, Esto's eyes were gloomy as he thought, at least there haven't been any lies yet. Waleski continued, from now on, you will take on missions very different from before. Esto asked quizzically, how are they different? Suddenly, Waleski raised his cup and said, yes, they will be special missions that only a leader is capable of handling. Right after that, he lowered his head and grinned, a confident smile mixed with a bit of malice. On a school campus, someone else also said, yes, there will be special missions that only a leader is capable of handling. Esto was surprised and thought, a leader? Scene change, someone threw a bag of money on the table and said, you have to take this. The bag was labeled Leader of the Ignis Guild. He then added, it's your promotion gift. It includes the new team, uniform and emblem, a card, and other support equipment, along with the team card. Parker looked at Esto with admiration, while Esto, still holding his glass, stared blankly at the pile of money. That person added, and finally, Nura, still wearing her necklace, looked toward the money bag. Vice Leader Waleski added, this is just my personal curiosity. It has nothing to do with the guild master. Esto didn't understand Waleski's intention. Waleski added, I wonder what kind of power the new leader has that the guild master wants you to join us so badly. So, I was wondering about that while waiting for you. Waleski placed both hands on his thighs and added, so could you give me a little demonstration before you leave? Little leader? Esto looked hesitant, then grabbed his sword and said, now show me how strong you are. A moment later, Waleski was on the ground, his cup fallen to one side, his sword slipped from his grasp, while Parker and Esto couldn't be seen. Waleski suddenly laughed out loud. A cup of hot water and a plate of pastries were on the table, while a coffee cup lay overturned on the floor, its contents spilled out. Waleski looked up, his face weary, and gazed at the steaming cup of hot water, thinking to himself, I have to fight? Against something like that? Don't make me laugh. Waleski sat on a chair, draping his sword over the back and leaning back to rest. I have to see just how strong this kid is. Waleski then shot towards Esto like an arrow. Esto was startled by the sudden attack from Waleski. A question popped into Waleski's mind. Why isn't he defending himself? But Waleski didn't have to wait long, as something flashed past him. Waleski was shocked to see that Esto hadn't even lifted a finger. Both of his hands were still holding the hot cup. Waleski was stunned to realize that he was now pointing his own sword at his neck. He began to tremble, thinking to himself, I can't move. Esto calmly said, what you wanted to see. Then, Esto's eyes glowed as he spoke again. Is this enough? Now truly terrified, Waleski fell to his knees, looking up at Esto, his face a mask of bewilderment and panic. His sword had fallen from his hand. Waleski panted, a leader? Yes, you should have been clearer. Waleski, he should be the guild master. Some papers fell to the floor. A voice explained, this is Dominator's slope. Waleski, then how can I possibly control a predator as strong as myself? Waleski continued to think as he looked at Esto's cold demeanor. Not being swallowed whole by it is already a good thing. But then Waleski broke into a smile. In the end, he just put his hands behind his head, leaned back in his chair, and said, yes, a new era has begun. At a film set, a dark voice spoke up, wonderful. A patch of land appeared. Esto then asked his cactus, do you like it? The cactus replied, yes, I do. I really do. I like it a lot. He then laughed happily and said to the potted plant, that's good, Ahu. After that, Esto was in a room. The room had many boxes that looked like houses for cats. On the cabinet, there were pictures. The pictures showed beautiful natural landscapes. Esto thought to himself, did they really need to do all this? Nura then held up some kind of shirt and laughed joyfully, saying to Esto, Esto, look, new clothes. Inside the box were very neat shirts, and beside them were clean shoes. Esto said casually, yeah, clothes. But Nura added, it's not just clothes. Nura added, because they're enchanted with magic. Isn't that cool? She added that it has self-cleaning and temperature control abilities, as well as shock absorption. Esto then thought to himself, clothes. I wonder if Natu would want to wear clothes. Then Esto asked, Nura, wait, Nura. Nura said, Esto said, I'll see if I can buy clothes that Natu and Suki can fit into. Nura said, Nezu doesn't need clothes. Suki came closer to Esto and said, I also find it troublesome, so don't worry about it. Esto knelt down on one knee and asked Suki, what if you get cold without warm clothes or feel embarrassed about being naked like this? Suki thought to itself, he's making my heart race. Suki then jumped into his arms and told him, animals don't wear clothes. Grr, we have fur. Only then did Esto realize, letting out an ah. Nura then said, I heard that people usually wear nice clothes to be treated well. Esto lowered his head and said, if my situation were better, it would be fine. Nura replied cheerfully, more people will like you. Esto was surprised and said, just because some people have high social status, does that mean they'll be liked by many? Some people just won't like you regardless. Nura hesitated and replied, at least they won't automatically attack you. Nura looked at him with an innocent expression and said, Nezu will do her best to protect you, but it will be very troublesome. If someone stronger than Nezu attacks you. She suddenly remembered reaching her hand out to her mother and letting out a terrified scream. Esto suddenly fell silent, staring intently at her. Suddenly, he reached out and gently placed both hands on Nura's shoulders. Then he removed her shackles and said, I'll take this off when no one is around, being chained up like this all the time. Must be uncomfortable. Nura said happily, I'm fine. My body is used to it, so it doesn't get in the way when I walk. Esto looked at her with pity in his eyes and replied, seeing you like this makes me uncomfortable too. She replied cheerfully. All right then. Suki, who was on his back, jumped to the ground. Esto continued, thank you for the new clothes and for being happy for me. And one more thing. You don't need to worry anymore. Nura leaned forward and called out his name. Because now, if I want to, I can make anyone kneel at my feet. He was still in a half-kneeling, half-sitting posture. He continued, I've realized a few things recently. Furthermore, my powers are getting stronger and stronger, so why should I worry? He suddenly remembered a time when a man swung a sword down at him, and also when he was attacked by other monsters. Think about it. Isn't this better than running away? His hand clenched into a fist as he said hesitantly, I'm probably a more selfish human than I thought. In the middle of the spacious room, a voice rang out, there is a request. A carefully sealed letter was delivered by Parker right in front of Esto as he was eating a meal. Esto was still focused on his bowl of soup. He thanked the person who had just delivered the letter. Parker raised his hand and scratched his head saying, well, this is my salaried job after all. Right, you've gotten used to the Academy's ways. Esto took the letter in my hand and said quite comfortably, I was getting a bit bored with nothing to do, but now that there's a request, I feel a bit relieved. Parker was overjoyed and said, woohoo, you're so meticulous, Esto. No. Should I call you leader now? The main character calmly invited him to eat together, and he asked back, really, I'll go get my food right away. With a spoon in his mouth, the main character thought, whether they call me a leader or a commander, I still don't know what I'm supposed to do. The letter was a request form. The requester was Haga, and upon seeing that name, he suddenly repeated it once. The cactus heard the name and exclaimed, whoa, I know that place. It began to show off its knowledge. That's one of the new ducal families in the country. The head of the Mubian family is the current emperor's cousin, and he's incredibly flexible with his body. The main character looked at the cactus and asked, have you met him? It looked back and replied, yes, I have a wide circle of acquaintances. Nura glanced around and asked, what did it say? Esto calmly explained, Ahu said it has met our requester before. Nura started to flatter it. Ahu knows everything. That's amazing. You're truly a wonderful cactus. The cat was curled up at the foot of the table, fast asleep. Thanks. You're pretty cool too. The cactus propped up its two branches and said, the Denmu I know is a little crazy. Recalling his image, it added, I don't know much else, but his swordsmanship is quite good. Esto's eyes widened as he asked, is he that strong? A flat denial suddenly rang out. No. It continued, he's not just strong. Before he became the family head, there was another person also known for their swordsmanship, but rumor has it he defeated that person with a single sword strike. He also wins when facing monsters and wins every single match. The main character silently assessed, someone that powerful is also making a request. Parker, carrying a tray of food, said, this meal, let's eat. Esto replied, yeah. Parker hoped he would enjoy his meal. The cactus warned, there's a hair in the soup. A big question mark appeared over Parker's head as he saw the scene and heard Ahu's warning. The dining hall then returned to its usual peaceful state. Esto held the letter in his hand with its descriptive request. Esto began to ponder again, thinking, just as I thought, there's nothing specific. Suddenly, he asked Parker, are you done eating? He replied, huh? Then Esto quickly grabbed the food tray and said, then let's go. Parker looked up worriedly. Then he looked away to avoid the attention. Watching Esto walk ahead, he called out, hey, Commander, I noticed it before, but you're pretty unique, you know. Hearing these words, Esto wondered, what do you mean? He replied, no, it's not like that. Esto gave him a gentle, silent glance. Suddenly, an image of a brutish man appeared, yelling, You damn monster! Get out of my sight! As Esto walked, he thought, now that I think about it, it's been a long time since I've eaten with someone. The scene changes to a corridor. A man's footsteps echoed softly on the tiled floor. Shortly after, another person quickly chased after and caught up to him. Esto suddenly stopped. He turned his head and realized it was Parker. In that moment, their eyes met intensely. Esto asked, "Do you still have work at the headquarters?" A large question mark appeared over Parker's head, and he explained, "I haven't had any work for a long time. The request form I gave you was the last one." And so, their exchange began. Esto said, "So you're on a break? Congratulations then." He replied, "No, I'm still working." Then he reached up to adjust his tie and asked back, "You don't know, Esto? Stop with the attitude and just say it." Parker confidently introduced himself. "I, BNA, Parker, have been transferred to the command squad." Esto suddenly turned to look at Parker and asked, "A squad?" He held out his hand and said, "So from now on, consider me a soldier directly. Under your command, I look forward to working with you, Commander." Esto looked up with a slightly worried expression and replied, "Same here." The two of them grasped hands firmly in a friendly handshake. Esto thought, "I suddenly have a teammate and a soldier under my command." On his left chest was a badge with two eagle wings. He continued to think. A calm Commander. Parker, a bit flustered, waved a hand in front of his face and said, "Commander, are you okay? Maybe I was a bit too much." Esto lowered his head and replied, "First, let's pack our things." Hearing this, Parker asked again, "Where are we going?" Esto said as he started walking, "I'm planning to head out. We need to go to our client's place, Mubizega." Esto, along with Nura and the cat, was standing in front of the gate. A man was standing guard nearby. As he glanced back, another man suddenly approached and said, "Just as I thought." Parker was carrying all the luggage and exclaimed, "Won't we need camping gear?" Both Esto and Nura froze for a few seconds. Esto continued to explain, "Parker, we don't need to camp." He replied cheerfully, "I also brought snacks. Look." Parker held out his hand and said, "Tada, salted crab and grilled octopus cakes." He proudly presented the smelly food and said, "This is a limited edition that I spent all my money on. Since you're the commander, I'll give you a special half." When Esto heard that, he immediately refused. "No, I'm fine." Those words hurt Parker. His eyes welled up with tears. The guard standing in front of the gate said, "Excuse me, the Haga territory is outside our departure route. Instead, we will take you to the Reynold underground cave, which will cut the journey in half." The guard pulled a lever and said, "I will activate the gate. Have a safe trip." Esto slowly walked towards the gate, a purple light shining on his face inside the cave. Darkness enveloped everything. Water droplets fell, and black stalactites covered the area. Esto looked down at the ground to assess it, while Parker looked terrified. He was trembling and shaking his head when suddenly, someone else appeared behind him. That person laughed maniacally and greeted him. Suddenly, a pair of blue wings appeared. Parker tried to fly up but hit something in front of Esto and the person who had just scared him. Parker fainted on the ground. Seeing this, Esto asked, "Are you okay?" He replied, "Yeah, I'm seeing stars." The person who had scared Parker said, "You're quite an energetic pigeon, aren't you?" Parker immediately asked, "Who are you?" The man laughed and replied, "That's right. I am the manager of this teleportation gate." Esto was a little surprised and asked politely, "Excuse me, manager, are we in the Reynold underground cave?" The man laughed cheerfully and said, "Oh, what a polite child. It's been a long time since anyone visited this cave." Suddenly, bats flew out from the cave, and in the darkness, his voice echoed, "But why would a young person like you come here?" Esto bowed his head and explained, "We are on our way to the Haga territory." The man smiled and asked, "Haga?" His eyes flashed with a fearsome glint. He continued, "Not many adventurers dare to go to that land of death." Esto wondered why the fake Haga territory was called the Land of Death. An image of a house appeared in Esto's mind as the old man explained, "The emperor didn't dare to keep his multi-talented relative by his side because he was an all-around genius, strong and very handsome." The old man laughed, revealing a mouth of mostly missing teeth. That alone was enough to show why the emperor was wary. The manager pointed ahead and asked if he saw the path in the dark cave. Before Esto could answer, he continued, "Although that is the only gate connecting to Haga's territory, no one knows what's inside." Esto asked, "No one knows? What does that mean?" The old manager laughed and said, "It means I can let you go, but I can't guarantee your lives will be spared. Torn into 100 pieces, and no one would know." Parker's face turned pale, and he asked, "Are there monsters in there?" The old man replied, "You're stating the obvious." Countless glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, and the manager added, "The territory ruled by the Duke is filled with deadly, long-fanged monsters, which means that cowardly king is afraid of his own relative." The old manager's smile made both Esto and Parker nervous. Esto glanced in one direction, then looked straight ahead. The tunnel manager smirked and thought to himself, "Look at this kid, not scared or distracted at all." Something unusual flickered in Esto's eyes as he stepped forward a few steps. The manager pointed at him and said, "You better be a little more careful." He pointed directly at where Esto's heart was pounding and warned him to try not to let that cowardly king notice him. Otherwise, he would be swallowed whole before he could even break out of his shell. Esto smiled lightly and said, "Please send this message to the Duke for me. I would be more than happy to accept his invitation." He started to walk away but glanced back at the manager and said, "And when that time comes, he can speak to me freely without hiding." Esto's figure faded into the distance, but the old manager stood still, watching him. He pondered for a moment, then a savage laugh echoed. "Speak freely and without hiding, huh?" The old manager's hand went to his neck, and a moment later, a cut tore through the skin. Suddenly, a handsome young man appeared and exclaimed, "How interesting!" A small light flickered in the dark, where Esto, Parker, and Nura were walking. Parker suddenly looked around in fear, then glanced at a stone-faced Esto and an excited Nura. Esto suddenly said, "I didn't know you were afraid of being underground. Sorry about that." Parker trembled and stammered, how? How did you know?" Then he calmed down and asked, "Did you just read my mind?" Esto replied, "I apologize if that was rude of me." Parker, more confident now, put his hands on his hips and said, "No, it's fine. You can read it as much as you want. You're the commander after all." Right after, Parker scratched his head and added, "Rather than being scared, it's more accurate to say it's a trait of my race." Hearing this, Esto asked, "A racial trait? In the desolate, mountainous forest?" A voice echoed, "Because avians are a species that usually lives on high mountains and hills. We tend to feel uncomfortable in enclosed spaces like this." Inside the cave, Parker continued, "It's also hard to fly in here because it's too narrow." Esto replied, "Is that so? Since this cave connects directly to Higa's territory, we'll arrive in half a day if we walk without stopping." Glancing back, Esto continued, "Because of the limited usability of the teleportation gate, we'd have to wait a full day to use it again, so I thought going through the cave would be faster." Parker, as if realizing a new truth, said, "This way is actually more efficient." Esto immediately replied, "It's also because I teleported without thinking about the whole team." He immediately denied it. No, don't worry about making mistakes. You just need to give orders. That's all." Esto placed a finger on his temple and said, "Give orders? Does that mean you'll follow all my instructions without regard for your own wishes?" Parker gave a professional smile and replied, "Yes." Esto pressed his lips together, calculating. In the end, it's no different from dominating their minds and controlling them. Parker was as cheerful and confident as a bird, and continued, "It's not that I'm not thinking about what I want. I'm here because I want to follow you." Hearing that, Esto asked, "You want to follow me?" He replied, "You are my superior, but you also saved my life." Parker suddenly remembered the time Esto stood up to protect him. Esto lowered his head, brushing it off, and replied, "I was in danger too at that time." Parker became cheerful again and said, "Even so, if it weren't for you, I would have died. I'm truly grateful." While Parker was speaking, Nura suddenly got angry and growled continuously. Parker was scared and whimpered, "Hick, why is it acting like that?" Esto called Nura's name to calm it down, when suddenly, from a distance, a dark creature appeared. Esto wondered, "Is it a monster?" "There are so many." Parker immediately asked, "Many? How many?" Nura replied, "A large number, and they're fast too." Parker couldn't control himself and cried out, "So how close are they?" Esto looked down and saw a few cracks under his feet. He replied, "Right beneath us." As soon as he finished speaking, the ground cracked even more, and a species of yellow larvae writhed and crawled up from the ground. Parker was so scared, he stammered, unable to form a complete word. Looking at the wriggling things that had just emerged from the ground, someone shouted, "Sandworms!" Seeing this, Esto asked, "Giant worms?" Ahu immediately replied, "Sandworms. Wow, this is the first time I've seen them." Ahu was excited while being held in Nura's arms, and it continued, "It's okay. They're not aggressive at all. Their temperament is very gentle. As long as you don't touch them, they won't get angry." Ahu pointed forward and asked everyone to look at the sandworms. The sandworms slowly crawled onto the surface, but didn't bother anyone. Ahu continued explaining, "They have no reason to attack us. They don't eat people or plants." Esto squatted down and asked Ahu, "So what do they eat?" It replied, "They eat dirt." The yellow worms crawled on the ground, opening their large mouths to gnaw on chunks of earth. Esto and Nura both calmly watched the scene before them, while Parker screamed desperately, "Help me!" Ahu kept reassuring him, "They won't kill you." "Hey, you lame chicken, are you crying?" Esto looked towards the sandworms as if he was calculating something. Suddenly, he turned around and said, "They say we can pass through." Parker, crawling on the ground, asked, "What if they eat us?" Esto said, "They don't eat people." Watching Esto cross through the crowd of yellow worms, Parker said again, "Commander, what if you get caught by them?" Esto continued to walk briskly and replied, "It's fine. They've known we were here for a while. They're probably curious because no one has appeared in this cave for a long time." He looked up as if he had just grasped an interesting piece of information and exclaimed, "Ah, they said they made this cave." Parker's lament echoed again. The sandworms? Oh my god. Standing on the other side of the swarm of worms, Esto offered some encouragement. Their emotions are quite similar to human curiosity, so you can just come across. Parker let out a choked sob, hugging his trembling body tightly, then turned his eyes towards the sandworms and whined, "Oh dear." Parker hesitated for a long time before slowly starting to walk towards the worms. Esto looked at him with a worried expression and said, "Parker, if it's too difficult," he angrily shouted. "No, I can do it." Parker's feet trembled with each step forward. While Esto was still thinking, I was going to ask the sandworms to move a little. From the darkness, the choked sobs of Parker echoed. After overcoming that terrifying ordeal, Parker complained, "Ugh, I'm all dirty." Nura also replied sadly, "My fur smells like poop." Esto didn't think the smell was that bad, but Parker asked a rather naive question. "So, does it smell that bad?" Esto said as he walked, turning back to Parker. "What's wrong with a bad smell?" "It doesn't smell bad. It's fine." He then thought, someone who's so good at controlling his emotions still can't lie, can he? Looking at the floating light orbs high above, Parker spoke again. "It seems I've misunderstood this Reynold cave." Hearing this, Esto turned back and asked, "What do you mean?" Parker's voice echoed, while pairs of eyes lurked from the darkness. "There's a story that says down here there are many monsters that attack people, which is why not many visitors come. But looking at the sandworms, even though they're ugly and incredibly stinky, the sandworms are very nice." Esto asked again, "Are you still scared even though you know they won't attack us?" Parker, while walking through the cave behind Esto, continued to speak, "They're so slimy that I'm scared. Just seeing them appear makes me feel like I'm about to be eaten by them." Esto, walking ahead, glanced at him and said, "Is that so? I think they're cute." Parker looked horrified and asked back, "Cute? Those wriggly, slimy things?" Esto spoke up to defend the worms. "Yes, they came all this way to find us, and they even act cute when they move their bodies." Esto's cute sandworm wriggled a few more times upon hearing Parker speak. "That's them acting cute?" The brilliant yellow lights once again illuminated their path. Looking around, Esto judged, "We must be getting close." Parker continued to complain, "I want to wash this smell off as quickly as possible. Even just a quick rinse would be fine." Suddenly, Nura's nostrils flared as he took a long sniff. He pointed forward and said, "Hey, there's water nearby." Following the direction he pointed, Nura continued, "I can smell clean water and hear a waterfall over there." In front of the two was a large, shining object from which a clear stream of water flowed, and a question arose, was a waterfall inside a cave? The waterfall cascaded down onto the dry ground. Esto's team stood at its base. They marveled at the sight. It's a real waterfall. He approached the nearby stream, then bent down to scoop some water into his hands before letting it go. The water seemed very clear. He turned his head, about to say, "It's pretty cold, so be careful." Before he could finish, Nura dashed past him and jumped into the stream with a splash, sending water flying all over Esto. He smiled and played in the water, not forgetting to say, "It's so cool in here." Esto and Parker, standing on a nearby rock, also exclaimed, "That looks like fun." The two standing by were splashed and soaked, silent, not knowing what to say. They looked at each other for a moment and then burst into delighted laughter. The blue-haired guy spoke up, "Well, Nura did say so." Esto, sitting on the ground, also replied, "I guess so." Nura played joyfully in the water, calling for Esto to come in too. The blue-haired guy glanced over, asking, "Aren't you going to wash the cat?" Esto looked over at the scowling cat. "Suki doesn't like water." The blue-haired guy said caringly, "But the water's right here. A little wash should be fine, right? You can get sick from being dirty." Suki, grumbled, "That bird brain, no. What are you talking about? I'll wash myself." With that, it stood up and walked away, shakily dipping a paw into the water. "I really don't like water." Suddenly, a gust of wind pushed it into the middle, startling it. Not understanding what was happening, it turned out the bird had picked it up and jumped in. "All right, in you go." It only had time to let out a meow as the bird shouted and dove, and all that was left to hear were the tragic cries of Suki. Esto, standing in the shallows, called out to Nura and was surprised to see Suki standing on his head, struggling constantly. This immediately made him burst out laughing. Suki jumped onto the bank, growling, "I won't let him get away with this. That bird brain." "Just kidding." Esto had to reassure it. "Calm down, Suki. Thanks to him, your fur is clean now." With that, he bent down. The person helped it sit up straight for a bit so I can dry it off, and the bluebird behind him also scratched its head and chuckled. "Does the kitty like it?" Suki's fur bristled. "I'll kill him." Esto had to hug it to keep it calm, as Parker immediately replied, "Yeah." Esto explained. Suki was just startled. He advised Parker, "You should apologize, and promise not to do that so suddenly again." Parker was stunned for a moment, then he bowed his head to apologize, saying with a sad face, "I'll let you know first next time." Damn it. As Esto started to walk, he said, "All right, let's get moving." Ahu kept crying out, I'm thirsty." Suki yelled, "What are you doing?" Esto suggested, "Water." Ahu explained, "I just drank some, but it wasn't tasty. This must be what hunger feels like for a cactus, being a picky eater, huh?" Esto could only advise, "Come on, drink some water. Being too fussy isn't good for you." But Ahu kept insisting, "Can you give me something else to drink?" He was puzzled. "Something else?" He replied, "Something stronger, with a different texture, and delicious." He frowned and thought, could its diet have changed since that kiss? It's a living thing, a plant that already drinks blood. Then he placed his hand on it, wondering, or is my blood different from the rest? It couldn't help but exclaim, "Getting my head patted feels so good." Esto said, "Let out your thorns, quickly." Parker came closer, just in time to see Ahu extend its thorns and pierce Esto's hand. Blood dripped from his hand, and Ahu trembled with pleasure. "Blood, it's blood." Parker was confused, but Esto explained, "I'm just feeding the cactus, so there's no need to panic." Parker looked suspicious. "Do you think someone might have created that waterfall on purpose?" Esto also had the same suspicion. "Probably." Parker voiced his own thoughts. "I doubt an earthquake just conveniently dug out this waterfall to make a spring for bathing. It feels like some magnificent creature used to live here." Esto was quite curious. "Why do you think so?" Parker replied, "I've heard that caves like this usually have an owner." He continued, "Haven't you heard, Commander? Their owners can be tigers, wolves, or dragons." Esto was surprised. "Dragons live in caves too?" Parker explained, "Yes. I learned that dragons' territories are often caves. There have even been some recent discoveries of dragon lairs inside cave systems as well. But their bodies must be enormous." Esto chuckled and said, This place is certainly a bit small for a dragon to live in." Parker held up 2 fingers and gestured, "But some people say that the Ifma dragon, the most powerful of all dragon species, has 2 physical forms." Esto was surprised. 2 forms. Parker explained, "One form has wings, a tail, and short claws in the front, that sort of thing. They say that unless they need to use their power, most of them maintain a human form." Esto asked, "Are you saying that dragons live by transforming into humans?" He gestured to emphasize his point. "It's more than a transformation. It's like they have 2 bodies. Dragons are also a race highly favored by the gods. Isn't it written in the holy texts that the human body is the physical form of God? Therefore, dragons also have a second form created in the image of God. Though, to confirm any of this, we'd have to meet a real dragon face to face." Esto was skeptical. "I don't know, because I've never been to a temple." Parker was surprised. "Really? Every village is supposed to have a place for worship." Esto explained, "I was born in a very poor city up in the mountains. Besides, even if they were favored by God, in the end they amounted to nothing. Even though they were a race favored by God, they went extinct and left nothing behind." Parker gestured wildly in disagreement. No, it's actually the opposite, Commander," Esto asked. "The opposite?" And so he began to explain again. "I heard that the dragons abandoned this world and left, even though they were called guardians. They were also the most powerful predators at the top of the food chain." "Who could make dragons go extinct?" Esto asked. "Weren't they killed by humans?" Bear laughed and said, "That's impossible. The real reason is because of humanity's constant evolution and the aftermath of the wars that followed. The dragons mourned as they saw the world begin to shatter, and God gave them the final choice." Esto continued, "They could either continue to stay in this world as guardians," Bear said, "or leave this world for a world of their own." Esto understood, so they left. Bear said, "I don't know if it's true, but that's what the scriptures say. But one thing is for sure, dragons were greatly favored, perhaps even more so than humans." Hearing this, Nura became sad and then angry. Esto trembled. "Why is something following us? Are they not as friendly as you said? I think they want to kill us." Suddenly, 3 growling wolves appeared. Bear's jaw dropped. "They're red cave wolves." "No, they live here." The Nura gritted her teeth. "They don't look friendly. Maybe they're on edge because they're hungry. It's attacking from above." 2 wolves pounced, and Nura braced herself and threw a punch to one's jaw, knocking the wolf out cold on the spot. She let out a roar, causing the others to fearfully back away. Nura sensed one coming from behind. She turned and sent the wolf flying with a blood-soaked backhand. The remaining ones grew even more terrified. Standing nearby, Esto also reached out his hand towards 2 other wolves, and they suddenly became incredibly docile. Nura was overjoyed to realize Esto was using his power. He glanced at them and thought silently, "I don't want to kill them, but do wolves live in packs? If so," then he murmured, "From now on, I am your master." Hearing this, a wolf tilted its nose up and howled for a moment, then the whole pack knelt and cleared a path. Bearer spoke to Nura, "But you just bathed this white-furred beast and now it's all dirty again." Nura smiled and replied, It's okay, I'll bathe it again later. And my name is Neu. Calling me Whitey sounds weird, so just call me Neu." Bearer said cheerfully, Right, I understand." He looked up and noticed the exit. The 3 of them were truly happy. His eyes lit up. "It's Haiga." Esto looked around at the scene of castles, soldiers, and weapons. So this is the territory of Haga. As they were walking, they suddenly felt a tremor. They panicked. What was that? An earthquake? It's not an earthquake. Nura pointed. Look over there. A group of people on horseback is approaching. Bearer exclaimed, so many. The person in the lead dismounted and said, are you the commander of the Ignis Guild? Esto replied, yes. The man bowed respectfully. The Lord is waiting for you. Then, inside the town, everyone was surprised and curious. Are they nobles? No. Look at that one's clothes. He's a member of Ignis. They look strong, don't they? One of them even has wings. Are they preparing for battle? We have to fight. That's right, new mercenaries. Why do we have to fight? Suddenly, the atmosphere became lively. People started shouting, let's fight. Sir, if you need our help, we are always ready to assist. Let's protect this city. Esto was surprised. He had to exclaim, this is truly a wonderful country. The person next to him asked, why do you think so? He explained, because of the hearts of these people. He thought, strong hearts that wish to protect the place where they live together. I have never, not even once, felt this desire to protect the land where I was born. Arriving at the royal palace, they were struck by its magnificence. The soldier spoke up, pardon me, but only the guild commander is allowed inside, no one else is permitted. And unless you have a direct invitation from the Duke, that is the rule. Esto turned and said, do as he says. Nura was quite worried, but Esto reassured her, I'll just quickly review the request and be right out, so just wait here. Nura looked disappointed, but she obeyed. Her expression suddenly changed suspiciously as she sent a thought. If anything happens, just scream for me. Esto nodded and went inside, and Para also shouted, leave this to me, Commander. I'll take good care of things. Before he could finish, the door slammed shut, leaving him in tears for Nura to comfort. Esto looked back, thinking, I don't think I've ever left the three of them alone together like this. He worriedly thought, I'll just get the information to confirm the request and then leave. Ahu appeared, interrupting his train of thought as it moved forward. It reminded Esto of when Nezdu held it for a while, but then suddenly, the other person spoke up. So you've arrived? Did you make an appointment? The person propped himself up and took off his glasses. You said you would gladly accept my welcome. Isn't that what you said? Esto's eyes widened when he realized the thing in front of him was a cactus, not a person. Ahu said shyly, my name is Ahu, and I'm a cactus. This made him freeze up and then scream at the top of his lungs. At the same time, both he and the cactus screamed, leaving Esto completely stunned. A moment later, he shook his head as some guards shouted, my lord, is something wrong? This made him snap out of it, clear his throat, glance at the cactus, and then turn back to the guards. It's nothing. Return to your posts. They looked at each other quizzically before leaving. He let out a sigh of relief and said, I heard the commander was an eccentric fellow, but I didn't think he was a cactus. I heard that the commander was a normal human. You can really walk and talk like a person, can't you? The cactus retorted irritably, what? Are you stupid? He looked down, smiled, and added, your spines are quite sturdy. I like that. The cactus replied, no matter what I am, there's no way this blockhead could be the Duke. Esto stepped forward and said, I'm the commander of the squad. Didn't you say we've met before? MB looked surprised, then chuckled. Ah, just a precaution. I didn't know if you had a hobby of disguising yourself as a cactus or not. Esto replied, I have no such hobby. The man said, but you have the ability to do so, don't you? The ability of mind manipulation. Esto looked bewildered, and the man added, oh, so I was right? I was just guessing, since someone who can read minds could probably control others too. Esto asked, just how much do you know? The man smiled and said, I was just guessing. Don't be so sensitive, my friend. MB thought to himself, yes, there's no doubt about it. The pressure he exudes is truly endless. He extended his hand. Let me introduce myself again. I am MB Vega, the one who sent the request to your guild. It's a pleasure to meet you. Esto stared blankly for a moment before shaking his hand. I'm Esto from the Ignis Guild. He added, so, what's the request? Before he could finish, the man said, first, there's something I'm a bit curious about. If you're not controlling the cactus, then what is that talking cactus? A monster? The cactus got angry. You're calling me a monster. Well, you're right, but to call me a monster like that, I won't go easy on you. Immediately, the cactus leaped up, startling MB in fear. What is it saying? Then he jumped onto the table, while the cactus ran around it below, waiting for him to come down, leaving Esto standing there speechless. Then he bent down and called, Ahu, come here. The cactus immediately turned and ran towards him. He asked the Duke, so, what is the request? Duke, your grace, did you hear what Ahu said? He turned back, sweating and stammering, that. After a moment, Mubi calmed down. So that's what the cactus said? I heard everything. It was even trembling. How scary. What's wrong? Am I not allowed to hear it? He said, I'm sorry for asking, but can you also hear plants speak? Do you also have the ability? He said, blushing. The Duke immediately cut in. No, I don't. What are you talking about? If it were the sword I always carry, then I would understand. Then he looked up and said, "What does your sword have to do with anything?" The Duke replied, "There's a bond that grows stronger through fresh blood, like if that cactus drank your blood, for example." The Duke rubbed his chin. "Is that so?" "This is definitely your power. Your ability is to let the voices of plants reach my senses. This ability is activated through a medium. You can also give verbal commands, but if enough blood is absorbed, you don't need to say anything to activate your ability." He replied, "You know more about my power than I do." Mew waved his hand and said, "Don't misunderstand. I didn't specifically investigate you. It's just that the information I've gathered over the past few years just happens to be useful now." He said, "Investigating like that, does that mean there are others with abilities like mine?" The Duke replied, "There were, but it's only a theory. To be honest, the traits of our physical forms have been passed down in my family for generations. I was misunderstood because of my hair color, misunderstood for my black hair, black eyes, and monstrous abilities. Everyone wondered about this, that the Haga family are descendants of the Black Dragon." Mu raised his sword. "Many people have wondered if the Haga family are descendants of the Black Dragon." His face darkened. "The Black Dragon?" Ahu exclaimed. "His ego is so big." Suddenly, the Duke shivered and stumbled. Esto stepped forward. Duke Muon spoke. "I can feel the essence of the Black Dragon flowing in my veins." "Yeah, right." Ahu tugged at his clothes. "Let's just go home." The Duke waved his hands and laughed. "Sorry, I was just kidding. Obviously, I'm not a Black Dragon." He sheathed his sword. "I was just talking about the rumors that once existed." He turned around. "Because those rumors are related to the request I have." Esto spoke up. "What is your request?" The Duke tossed a large bag into his hands. "It's so heavy." He said, "I want to find the true descendant of the Black Dragon." He was truly surprised by that. The Duke continued, "1 month. If you try to help me with this for the next 1 month, my request will be considered fulfilled, regardless of the outcome." He said, "If you're the Duke who abandoned his position." The Duke said brightly, "So don't worry and just do as I say. I've already found a replacement, so 1 month will be fine." He said bluntly, "I should let you know beforehand, I'm not a close combat fighter. Do you have soldiers with you?" The Duke asked in return, "Soldiers? Do I need something like that? If you're talking about swordsmen, I am the top swordsman in the Empire." Ahu shivered with disgust. "That sounds so cringy." The Duke said, "Besides, if anyone wants to interfere with my business, they should be the ones fearing for their lives. If anyone wants to interfere with my business, they should be the ones fearing for their lives. I'm not like the previous clan heads, not even the Emperor is an exception, no matter who they are." He spoke up and asked, "Can you confirm that your desire to find the Black Dragon has nothing to do with your current thoughts?" He was startled. He read my mind. "He's a bigger obstacle than I thought." He said, "All right, I'll rephrase. The one making the request this time is not. This is not a matter for the Duke of this nation, but for an individual. It is I, Mubi. 7. This has nothing to do with politics at all." He nodded in understanding. Mubi's eyes widened as he said, "The Haga family certainly has no connection to the Black Dragon's bloodline, but it is true that we are mixed with the Black Dragon's blood." The door opened, and Muon continued, "One of my ancestors drank dragon's blood, and from then on, we gained this power." As time went on, Basser and the others saw Esto walk out towards him. As for him, when he heard that and was about to say something, Muon cut in, "It's quite similar to your cactus, isn't it?" Ahu spoke up. "Humph, you brat, don't drag me down to your level." Esto stepped forward and said, "Well then, Your Grace the Duke, please choose our destination first." He thought for a moment. "We should go somewhere, shouldn't we? Next, my task for this month is to investigate you, the one with the Black Dragon's power as recorded by my ancestors." Esto. Everyone was stunned, not understanding what was happening. He turned back and said with a smile, "Isn't this very interesting? Among all dragons, the pure power of the Black Dragon possesses the shadow attribute, and based on its mental abilities, it can dominate the normal rhythm of life." Then he started to look as if he was thinking about something again. "From my perspective, the ability to dominate that you have is too similar to the Black Dragons to be called a coincidence." Esto was skeptical. "No way." Mubi immediately affirmed, "You're right. I called you here because I've always thought you might have some connection to the dragons. So, let's help each other. For the next month." A beautiful woman's voice called out, "Where did you go?" "Mubi, there you are, my lovely star." Looking at the small boy huddled in a corner, the woman couldn't help but feel emotional, but she quickly brightened up and spoke too. "That boy, are you playing hide and seek because you can't sleep?" Hearing a different voice, the boy shyly looked up. The very next second, he felt himself floating. It turned out the woman had lifted him up, gently asking, "Then shall I tell you a fun bedtime story?" Hearing that he would be told a story, the boy agreed immediately. Yes. It turned out the woman was the boy's mother. She gently held him in her arms and soothed him. "The blood of a dragon flows within you, Mew." The boy heard his mother say this, and was a little confused. "Dragon's blood?" She smiled. "That's right. It's wonderful, isn't it?" It's a gift from the precious and most beautiful black dragon in this world. The boy pouted, and feeling a bit tired, he rested his head on his mother's shoulder, retorting, "You're lying. Grandpa told me that dragons disappeared a long time ago." "Oh my," the mother chuckled. "Did Mr. Black really tell you that?" The woman held the boy in her arms and strode quickly towards the room, telling him as she walked, "It's true that the other dragons may have disappeared because the world has become too vast and complex to protect the dragon species." The little boy pouted at his mother. "Oh, really? Why is that?" The mother continued. "However, please remember this, won't you? For my little star." She placed her son, who was eagerly listening to the story, onto the bed, flashing a bright smile at the little boy. "The dragons that share this blood with us have not disappeared. The proof is our family. For a very long time, our family has always produced healthy children." Seeing that his mother was about to leave, the little boy reached out and tugged on her clothes. But didn't they die a long, long time ago?" Hearing his childish question, she planted a warm kiss right on his little forehead. "Dragons are the guardians of the world. They do not grow old, get sick, or ever die. I told you already. They are the noblest and most beautiful creatures in this world. They are surely protecting our family somewhere out there." Seeing his mother's proud expression, the boy flinched slightly, shyly avoiding her gaze. What was that about? "If dragons don't willingly protect us, then it's because we're too weak for them to even bother with." She nodded in agreement with her son's words. "Yes, compared to dragons, we are nothing. However, by living virtuously and continuing our family line, we will be the only living proof of their existence in this world." Hearing his mother say that, the young one was silent for a moment, then looked up at his gentle mother and called out, "Jeria, then why doesn't the dragon just leave and remain hidden like this?" Jeria smiled, her smile lighting up. "Because the black dragon loves humans very much, you know." At that, Muan's heavy eyes suddenly snapped open. He sat bolt upright, rubbing his dizzy head. "That dream again?" Still dazed from waking up, another voice called out, "You're awake, sir?" He looked up and saw Esto sitting by the fire and asked, "Aren't you going to sleep?" Esto replied, "I just woke up myself." After that, The two of them were such introverts that only the crackling of the fire could be heard filling the silent space. Feeling a bit awkward, Muan scratched his face and started a conversation. After hesitating for a moment, he looked at Esto and asked, "Did I talk in my sleep?" Before he could even finish his sentence, Esto interjected, "No, you slept very peacefully." "Really?" Muan was a little skeptical, but Esto confirmed it for him. "Yes, it's very true." Muan was at a loss for words, his eyes darting around as he thought, come to think of it, the calm way he speaks is quite similar to Jeria. At this thought, he immediately shook his head vigorously to dismiss the thought. What on earth? Jeria was a gentle, warm woman. Her hair was a reddish pink and completely different from this gloomy guy over here. Esto sighed as he watched Muan act strangely again. "I don't know what else to say, but why are you awake instead of sleeping? I feel kind of bad about it." He glanced over at Nura, who was sleeping like the dead over there. Esto picked up a twig and poked the fire. "Have you forgotten? My most basic ability is to read minds of others. If someone dreams with images that are too strong, sometimes they will start to flood into my mind even if I don't want to see them. It's as if they're being broadcast directly to me." Hearing him say that, the flickering firelight reflected in Muan's pupils. He chuckled and said, "So you saw everything, huh?" Esto nodded. She was a beautiful and wise mother, wasn't she? Muan chuckled, scratching his head. "That's right, Jeria. My mother was very intelligent, unlike me." After saying that, he looked up at the sky, a shimmering river of stars catching his eye. Even though she's not here anymore. This feeling that was welling up inside him now. Sighing, and sensing Muan's somber mood, Esto quickly changed the subject. "You only slept for 1 hour. Can you not sleep anymore?" When Esto asked this, Muan shook his head. "No, I have insomnia." Recalling that scene of the massacre, Muan gave a wry laugh. "Haha, if I can get that much sleep, it's more than enough." Once again, the atmosphere fell silent. He suddenly burst out laughing. "Haha, letting you see a piece of my past through my memories. An interesting dream, wasn't it?" One person was trying to lighten the mood, while the other replied coldly. Esto just calmly said yes, making Muan fume inwardly. "Jeria was my father's second wife, but of course, I always considered Jeria my real mother. I heard my birth mother died while giving birth to me." As he said this, Muan's voice choked with emotion. Jeria was. His voice happily echoed in his head. "My lovely little star. She called me her little star, but I couldn't give her anything." Muan gritted his teeth. Not even her life. He was furious with himself. That night, monsters invaded the estate. The servants' shouts echoed continuously. "Monsters are coming." The sharp eyes gleamed in the darkness. Frantic calls rang out. "Jeria, where are you?" That day, they all died, except for me. Muan forced a smile, but he didn't realize how strained it looked. If the black dragon still existed in this world, I would really just want to ask it one thing. Muan said, flopping down, while Esto listened silently as Muan poured his heart out. "What should I do?" He reached his hand towards the sky. What is there left for me to protect now? Muon said helplessly. I don't need this cursed power anymore. If I have to go on like this, it would be better for the bloodline of the Haga family to disappear forever. Seeing his devastated state, Esto said, on the contrary, if your grace has nothing left to protect, then you can finally rest. Nonsensical thoughts often appear when one is sleep-deprived. He lifted his head. What? He said, just go to sleep, your grace, leaving him speechless. He thought to himself, is it because I was wondering if he was a descendant of the Black Dragon? Then he sat down and added, you won't have any nightmares tonight. He thought, that's right. He said he can read people's minds and hearts, so wouldn't a few nightmares be no problem for him? Right after that, his eyes grew heavy and he fell asleep. The next morning, a pot of porridge was cooking, and its fragrant aroma woke him up. He yawned and said, huh? Is it morning already? Then he realized, with a start, did I sleep that well? Someone who can use mind powers is truly amazing. For the first time in a while, I've slept so peacefully. A strange voice spoke up. Greetings. Just woke up? So lazy. Are you related to a sloth? It was a small, walking, talking Aru. He smiled brightly and replied, no, of course not. I don't usually sleep this much. The Aru jumped up. Whatever, liar. Go wash your face before you say anything else. He closed his eyes and chuckled in response. Wow, so blunt. He rubbed his eyes with his hand. At the same time, the Aru hopped away. Suddenly, a guy named Parker walked over with a bowl of soup, saying, this is a hot ham and cheese corn chowder. He reached out to take it, but before he could finish his thanks, he looked down and saw a murky black soup cooked with many things. His face darkened as he asked, what is this? The guy named Parker changed the soup's name to a cheese, milk, potato, and broccoli medley soup. He yelled, did you just change the name on the spot? The guy named Parker asked again, confused. Really? Is it a ham, cheese, and crab soup? He grimaced. Isn't this just a random concoction of everything you brought? The guy named Parker said, not at all, Your Grace the Duke. Please don't ignore my 20 years of cooking experience like that. He retorted, how old did you say you were to have 20 years of cooking experience? The guy named Parker replied, I'm 21. I learned to cook when I was just 1 year old. Then I started making my own baby food. This annoyed him, and he said, nonsense. The Aru suddenly appeared. It's not unreasonable. Since the aven species are related to birds, they can fly very well at just 1 year old. The guy named Parker added, haha, that's right. I was also a talented little bird who could fly from a very young age, and now with my current job, I also work as a messenger, a recognized member of the commander's squad. He turned away and said, so, where is Commander Parker? The guy named Parker turned away, sweating, who knows? He said he was going to scout the area for a bit. He asked again, where is that reliable member? Parker flinched and waved his hands. Shouldn't we let him be alone sometimes? What happened was pretty shocking, after all. He wasn't adopted either, and he just found out he has dragon-like powers. He asked, when did the commander disappear? He replied, I think it was when I was cleaning the pot after breakfast. Huh. It's probably been a while, but he's the commander, so I'm sure nothing happened, right? He shot to his feet and said, this doesn't sound right at all, but this land is still not safe. He thought to himself, I should have told him to be more careful. Parker asked in surprise, what, not safe? He sighed, bandits, soldiers from the enemy kingdom. Haga is still a land that hasn't escaped war. To say that we're safe without any precautions is only possible when I'm by your side with my sword. Immediately, he dashed off, grimacing as he said, it seems like nothing has happened yet. Parker ran after him, asking, really? Should I go look for the commander then? He walked on saying, I'll go, you wait here. Immediately, he dashed off. Parker was amazed, he jumped so high. As he was leaping through the air, he suddenly detected the scent of blood. He saw someone in a black cloak and shouted, hey! Then he landed and asked, are you okay? Esto turned around, huh? Suddenly, a growling wolf startled him. He said, why are wild wolves out here? Looking at the pack of wolves growling and baring their teeth before him, Muban stared at them thoughtfully. Why are these wild wolves out in the open? Are they being mind-controlled? Seeing their eyes, which held no trace of goodwill, Esto's voice suddenly cut through his thoughts. Are you prepared to leave yet? Muban stepped forward and said, no, we were still having breakfast. Hearing that, Esto replied, then I'll head back right away. Muban paused and looked at him. But what are you doing out here? Esto, holding a wolf pup in his arms, said gently, these are the wolves I met in the underground caves of Reynold. A nearby wolf looked at Esto, its gaze entirely different from the way it looked at Muban. He looked at them and continued, they are a species that lives and hunts within the caves, but when they left the caves with us, they suffered great losses at the hands of humans. Hearing this, Muban stroked his chin. That makes sense. To the people of Haga, a pack of wolves is considered a nuisance, so of course they would be hunted. Esto looked at Muban, surprised. Hunted? He explained. They are predators, and the Reynold cave system is the only place that connects the Haga territory to the outside world. To ensure safe passage for the people, Eliminating monsters and beasts that pose a potential threat to their lives is the right thing to do. After all, if we don't, the weak will be devoured. Anyway, just let them fend for themselves. As he finished speaking, a scent caught his attention. He looked over and saw a large wolf licking blood from a small pup's body. And that one? Did you give it your blood? Noticing the blood stain on its mouth, Esto calmly replied, "Yes. I don't know if it will work, but my blood has saved injured animals before." Hearing this, Muban said, "I understand you want to help it. However, giving away your blood so freely isn't wise. If you are truly a descendant of the dragons, your blood can revitalize lesser creatures and turn them into your personal guardians, becoming servants to the Black Dragon, just like the Haiga clan." Hearing this, Esto gave him a confused look, which made Muban pause. "I said too much? Anyway, you should stop helping and just let them be." With that, he turned to leave. Just then, Esto's somber voice spoke up, "I agree with your words, your grace. However, we can change that now." He froze at those words, "Change." Esto calmly said, "Yes. If the wolves promise not to harm the people of Haiga anymore, could you give them something in return?" These words made Muban turn back to look at Esto. It was once said that the Black Dragon would mediate relationships between humans and other creatures. I'm getting closer to my original goal. Thinking this, he let out a soft chuckle. Just promising not to harm us isn't enough. Perhaps if they promise to become one of Haga's guardian forces, I can guarantee their safety and security. What do you think? Deep in the forest, a fragrant aroma wafted through the air. Parker was cooking soup. Seeing Esto, he exclaimed in surprise, "You're back." As soon as he finished speaking, he was startled by the pack of wolves behind him and shouted, "What's with them? They're wild wolves." Muon smiled and waved, "They're my new companions." Esto calmly added, "We've decided to travel together from now on." Hearing this, Parker yelled, "Commander, I can't provide food for wolves too." Esto heard him and said, "Is that the reason? You're panicking?" Parker quickly replied, "Don't you know how important meals are?" On the side, Nura's eyes lit up as she looked at Esto and the wolf pack. She hurried over, smiling with delight. "Is that a wolf cub?" He immediately replied, "Yes, but it's badly injured. I think if we just let its mother take care of it, the wound will only get worse. It was shot in the hind leg with an arrow. Parker, can you check on its condition?" Hearing this, Parker said, "Yes, sir. As long as it doesn't require minor surgery, I can help." He approached and said, "Bring out a few vials of medicine and a cloth." Looking at the wolf cub lying in the cloth, Parker carefully treated it. "Let's see." He was suddenly surprised. "Where's the wound?" Hearing this, Esto was surprised too, and Parker quickly said, "If a wolf cub was shot by an arrow, it's in the leg, its tail would have been pierced through. But this is just a tiny scratch that's too small to even be called an injury. Its temperature is also normal. It seems like it just recovered its strength." Parker looked up at his commander. "Are you sure it was hit by an arrow?" He thought for a moment, then said, "I'm not sure. I was mistaken. I must have confused it with another wolf." Behind his back, he hid the arrow. Seeing this, Muon stood behind him, silent and pensive. Esto hid the arrow behind his back, lowering his head to look at Parker, who was sitting on the ground. He said, "I must have been mistaken." Esto continued, "I probably confused it with another wolf." Muon crossed his arms, staring intently at him. He was silent, as if concentrating on something extremely important. Noticing Muon's gaze, he turned his head to look back at him. He put a finger to his lips, signaling to keep it a secret. He frowned in thought, so he doesn't want his teammates to know about his special ability. I wonder why. The campfire had burned out, and beds for the wolves were prepared. One of them gently bit the scruff of its sleeping pup. Suki was sleeping soundly in a tree when suddenly a voice called its name, Suki. It squinted, its eyes not yet adjusted to the light. Esto called up, "We're getting ready to leave." Suki looked down at the ground and saw Parker and Esto looking up at it. Everyone was already prepared to leave. The black cat looked curiously at the pack of wolves. "What are these things?" Suki stared at them for a moment, then it quickly jumped down. It successfully landed on Esto's head. He looked up at it and said, "They're our comrades now, and will be coming with us until the mission is complete." Suki asked, "Comrades?" He glanced at the wolves behind him. "Yes, they will also be new, legal citizens of Haga territory." Suki calmly licked its paw and said, "Do whatever you want. So, have you thought of our next destination yet?" Suddenly, a hand was raised, interrupting the conversation. "I should have said this sooner," Muon said with a smile, raising his hand. "But I've already chosen our next destination." A bewildered Parker leaned in and whispered in his ear, "When did you decide that, sir?" He nonchalantly replied, "Just now." Parker was shocked. "Huh?" Muon walked over to Esto and said, "I heard you grew up in a village. Where exactly is that hometown village?" Esto was surprised by MB's decision. Looking at him speechlessly, he recalled a village in the dark of night. Looking a bit sad, he quietly answered that it was Spia village. MB declared energetically, "I'm going there." Parker was so shocked he let out a shout, while Nura just blinked her innocent eyes in confusion. Ahu spoke up. Why would he do something he knows Esto won't like? Is he a pervert or something? Despite seeing the reactions of those around him, MB just kept smiling as if nothing was wrong. Ahu came to a conclusion. Look at that smile. He's definitely a pervert. Esto looked at him and asked, why do you want to go to my hometown? MB smiled and said, I only intended to observe you. He reached a hand out to him and continued. But from what I've seen, it seems you don't know much about yourself either, do you? He added cheerfully. If I meet the family who raised you, I might understand you better. Esto remembered his adoptive family. The expressions on their faces were full of indifference and anger. He hesitated. The people who raised him weren't his birth parents. No, that wasn't the issue. He frowned to himself, extremely opposed to seeing them again. A voice cut through his thoughts. Hey. MB leaned in close to his face, a meaningful smile on his lips. You should obey the request your master has made. He looked straight at him and said, don't you think so? Esto avoided his gaze. I understand. Let's go. At the Galaxy, a branch of the Ignis Guild, a voice rang out. Welcome back. Oh, I can't say that anymore. Hack placed a hand on his chest and bowed. He greeted politely. Welcome. How have you been? Guild Commander. Esto raised a hand to stop him and said, Branch Manager Hack. He smiled sheepishly. Please treat me like you used to. I'd be more comfortable that way. He asked hesitantly. But my rank. I'm your subordinate now. Esto replied, please. Hack cleared his throat a few times and said, if you insist. He seemed to revert to his old self, smiling boldly as he said to Esto, how have you been, Esto? Esto was a little surprised by his attitude, but quickly, as if a weight had been lifted, he smiled happily and replied, yes. Hack clapped him on the shoulder, praising him. You became the guild commander, and the new uniform suits you well. Please, come in. Although it seemed like he was praising Esto, in reality, he was feeling proud of himself. He said, I knew you'd amount to something. I told you I have a good eye for people. Moan and Parker stood by silently, listening to their conversation. Parker thought in confusion, why is he praising himself so much? Hack went on a long rant. My eye for people is extraordinary. My salary should be higher. Or if not, at least I should get all those multi-flavored candies you get from Delphia every month or week, right? He talked so much that Esto could only force a reply. A fair hand was placed over Hack's mouth, stopping him from speaking further. That hand belonged to Rosal, who said cheerfully, Esto, it's so good to see you again. Diep heard that you're heading to Spia village in the Riverlands, she said with concern. But the river and mountain region is very far from here. She reminded him, you'll have to cross many mountains, and the roads are very rugged. If you walk there, it will take a very long time and be a great hardship. So Hack generously continued Rosal's thought, I'll lend you a carriage to make your journey more comfortable. Rosal also agreed with his idea, saying, we will prepare a carriage for you. Esto said gratefully, yes, thank you. Hack smiled at Esto's group and said, well then, everyone must be tired. Please go rest in your rooms. The sun had set, and the last light of the day shone into the room. Esto sat silently on the bed, nostalgically looking around the room that was exactly the same as when he left. Just as he was thinking, strange noises from the door caught his attention. He looked towards the door curiously, wondering who it could be. The continuous noises from outside the door put Esto on guard. He wondered why anyone would be coming here. Suddenly, the door clicked open. Esto stared intently in that direction, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw it was his colleague Yu. He called out, Rosaline. Rosaline asked politely, am I disturbing your rest? Esto stood up from the bed and replied, no, it's fine. Rosaline quickly stepped forward. Do you know how to ride a horse? He answered softly, no, I've never learned how. She sounded a little disappointed. Is that so? That's a shame. But there aren't any carriages available right now. It seems they're all being used for other requests. We have a few horses, but if you can't ride. Before she could finish, Esto spoke up, it's fine. He smiled and told her, the request has a long deadline, so I can just go on foot. Rosaline still looked troubled. She tried to offer another solution, saying, at least I can get plenty of knights to accompany you. Outside the door, a few figures were eavesdropping, including 2 people, a beast, and a cactus. Esto noticed the people outside the door and glanced at them, but continued speaking to Rosaline, there's no need for that. She asked curiously, what do you mean? Of course, I have no combat abilities, but my client has proclaimed himself the best swordsman in the capital. I think I can trust him and will be safe going alone. Hearing himself mentioned, he was a bit stunned, but after hearing Esto's words, he thought with extreme embarrassment, self-proclaimed. Rosalind clapped her hands once, having made a decision. That's a relief then. If you need any help, you just let me know. Para raised his hand and said, excuse me. With a bright smile, he said, if you two are done talking, there's something I'd like to say. We're almost out of cooking ingredients. The pot in his hand was pitch black, as he said, the bottom is all scorched and dirty too. Ahu, annoyed, said, what the heck? It's so gross. Para laughed sheepishly while rubbing his head and said, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to get a new one. Can the guild provide one for us? Rosaline turned to point the way. Of course. I'll let you know which office to go to. He then asked, can we buy other things too? She immediately agreed, yes. Muan looked towards Esto and said, well, I'm heading to the weapon shop now. Nura popped her head up from the bed and said, have fun. Esto replied expressionlessly, yes, please be careful. Suki praised, good job. Muan felt a little dejected, not knowing what to say. He asked, am I going alone? Esto replied nonchalantly, I don't know anything about weapon shops. Didn't you say you used to operate in this area? Esto glanced at him. I'm not a close combat fighter. I just belong to a special operations unit. He clenched his arm and continued, so I've never had to use a weapon. Muan asked in surprise, so you don't know how to use a weapon at all? Esto confirmed that he didn't. Muan then asked again, I thought you grew up in the countryside. Have you never hunted animals or tracked them to their dens? Esto frowned, looking a little displeased, and said, I didn't want to kill them. Muan then asked, so have you ever killed a person? Hearing the question, Esto was lost in a memory. He remembered a bloody battle scene, blood, bright red blood from a sword spreading across the floor. He said with a somber expression, I have. Muan mused, so it's not like he's completely incapable. He looked at Esto and thought, the guy has never even slaughtered a chicken, but he can kill a person if necessary. Snapping out of his thoughts, he said, anyway. He then reached his hand out towards Esto. I know you have immense power, but humans are more fragile than you think, so it's better to at least have a weapon. He smiled cheerfully, saying this was also a request from the client. Esto sighed, Nezu, wait here with Parker and Ahu. Nura said sadly, I want to go too. He refused, no, I'll be right back, just get some rest. Nura sadly said goodbye, be careful. Ahu said seriously, but why are you taking the fox with you? Suki, who was about to walk away, paused with its paw in mid-air waiting for his answer. He replied, Suki will definitely follow me even if I try to stop it. Suki wagged its tail in satisfaction, saying, you understand me well, who would dare stop me? Muan whistled and walked confidently, while Esto curiously looked around. The two of them arrived in front of a weapon shop. Muan opened the door and called out loudly, excuse me, but before them was only an empty desk, with papers scattered all over it. A voice called out, who is it? Muan replied, a customer. From under the table, a middle-aged man with a white band on his forehead struggled to get up. He said, my head, I forgot to lock the door while cleaning again. He leaned on the table, straightened up, let out a sigh, and said, I'm not selling anything today, so please, leave. He asked the man, why are you selling anything? The man replied, why? Because Viscount Fabian just cleaned this place out. Looking at the empty weapon rack, he said, even though I'm short on stock, he still placed more orders and forced me to produce more weapons. The weaponsmith frowned, trying to remember, I heard he's gathering soldiers but has run out of equipment. Getting more weapons from other shops will be difficult too. Esto asked him, Viscount Fabian is gathering soldiers? The man looked at him as if he realized something. You're from the Ignis Guild, aren't you? The weaponsmith asked thoughtfully, then wouldn't you know more about it than I do? The young lady of that family is seriously ill. Esto was stunned by the man's words. Ill? The owner frowned, showing his suspicion. You really don't know the recent news? He cleared his throat with a few coughs, then mysteriously beckoned with his fingers. Haga and Esto ran up to the counter and leaned in close. The rumor is, he said in a soft voice, that it's a heart condition. The young lady of that house panics whenever she sees blood, and she has nightmares every night. A while ago, that family's soldiers were killed en masse, and it seems she's afraid of that emptiness. That's why he wants to find so many soldiers and is trying to find a long-term treatment for the young lady. Esto said nothing, just looking down with empty eyes. The owner smiled and returned to his normal volume. It's not a pleasant story. Is there anything else I can help you with? Haga nodded. Then can you sharpen a sword for me? The man replied cheerfully, of course. Only Esto was lost in thought about the story he had just heard. He remembered the words Sarah Bien had said, if you can read my secret, then that means we're secret friends. Okay. Suddenly, a voice cut through his thoughts. Esto. Haga handed him a sword, a small one. Take this. He took it with both hands and asked in confusion, why are you giving this to me? It's better than you being empty-handed. Safety comes first, and he pointed at Esto. You should pay attention to yourself. You're too careless with yourself. Then he turned around. To leave, let's go. He left Esto with a bewildered expression. Esto looked at the item in his hands and stammered, thank you. They walked down the street. As dusk began to fall, Esto looked over at the black cat Suki walking slowly beside him and called out, Suki, do you remember Sarah? Its voice entered his mind. I don't remember every human I've ever met or what they look like. He nodded. It's probably better not to remember. Suki called out to Esto. Her sad blue eyes had made his life miserable, but you still care about them, don't you? He clenched his hand into a fist. Sarah didn't do anything wrong. the other person probed. "So what are you going to do?" He said numbly, "I'm not going to do anything." Viscount Fabian shouted, "Bring him here right now." The receptionist was also flustered. "We can't do that, sir." He bared his teeth and glared. "Can't do it? Does the guild dare to cancel a request of mine?" The receptionist waved her hand. Now, please calm down. Just because you name them doesn't mean we have to carry it out that way." She shrugged because we received a request, but before she could finish speaking, Viscount Fabian cut in. "It's been 10 days. Just then, Esto walked in and recognized the man, Viscount Fabian. The receptionist gave a strange smile. "I'm sorry, my Lord Viscount. Commander Esto is now one of the leaders of the guild. Even if it is a request." Viscount Fabian was furious and shouted, "Shut up." He slammed the table. "How dare you talk back to me? Do you want this hall to go bankrupt?" The girl tried to explain. "I'm sorry, but this hall is under the jurisdiction of the Emperor, unless we receive a penalty or from an imperial proxy." He cut her off again. "Shut up. I told you to bring him here, this instant." This argument between the two was witnessed by Esto's party. Hager frowned. "So that's the infamous Viscount?" Esto replied awkwardly, "Yes." Hager stared at Viscount Fabian, but seeing his sloppy clothes and his behavior like a common ruffian, he wondered if the Viscount was the crazy one, not his daughter. Where is his noble dignity? And why would he show up looking like that? It's best to just ignore him and walk past. Esto agreed. "I think so too." The two of them started to walk away, amidst his loud shouting. Viscount Fabian's gaze swept past the nearby figures, and he yelled, "Esto!" The dark circles under his eyes were prominent, along with his untrimmed beard. He ran over, looking at Esto as if he were a precious treasure that had been lost. Viscount Fabian gripped Esto's shoulders tightly. "It's been so long. I heard you changed jobs. Do you have any idea how long I've waited for you?" His hands were trembling. "Will you be working here from now on?" Esto's expression was icy. "Let go." The Viscount, flustered, "Let go, of course." Viscount Fabian forced a smile. "I've been a bit of a mess lately. It's me, Leo Fabian. Please listen to me for just a moment." The corners of his eyes welled up with tears. "My daughter, Sarah, she isn't well. You can help her, can't you?" But Esto remained perfectly cold. "Why should I do that?" Viscount Fabian asked anxiously. "What do you mean?" "This is something that only you can do. Yes, if it's you, you can erase her memories or at least help her get a good night's sleep, can't you?" Hago watched from a distance, speechless. Esto turned away. "I'm currently on another request, so please leave for now." It was as if his entire world suddenly collapsed. "Another request?" The Viscount waved his hand and shouted, "That's not important. Cancel it." Haga cut in. "I don't want to." The Viscount looked over. "And who are you?" Haga pointed to himself. "Me? I'm the one who made the request." He pouted and wagged his index finger. "I have no intention of canceling my request, so you should just give up." The Viscount bared his teeth, seething with anger. This young brat, how dare he behave so insolently before a Viscount? Haga exclaimed, "Oh, my apologies, as I haven't introduced myself." He placed his hands on his hips and smiled pleasantly, stating his name, Mubi Haga. Viscount Fabian's expression darkened, and the entire atmosphere between the two of them seemed to freeze. The surrounding onlookers went completely silent. Viscount Fabian's eyes widened in thought, thinking, why would someone as important as the Duke show his face like this? Esto turned away without a word, and Fabian gave a relaxed smile, extending his hand. "My apologies for acting like some arrogant young Duke." While maintaining the smile on his face, Fabian thought in surprise. Someone as important as the Duke. He stood before Esto and said, "Don't tell me you still hold a grudge against me because of that incident, do you?" He recalled the scene of his own son pointing and cursing at Nura, even beating him. Snapping out of his thoughts, he placed a hand on his chest and said to him, "Good heavens, please don't hold a grudge over such a trivial matter. Think about it, shouldn't I be the one who's angry?" But after losing so much, he broke into a sweat and added, "I've already forgotten all about it. This is too sensitive a time to be thinking about things like that." The boy glanced at him, thinking to himself, that's right, he's always been this way, completely unaware of his own wrongdoing, and never willing to apologize. Seeing the boy turn back, he flinched in fear and said, "I will never ask you for anything again, please, just this once, just this one time. Help me." He grabbed the boy's shoulders and shook him. The boy said, "Why should I do that?" He was stunned. At that, the boy emotionlessly said, "Let go of me now." After he let go, the boy turned away. He let out an ah, thinking with a tremble, this can't be happening. Immediately after, he shouted, "Sarah wants to see you." Then he fell to his knees and begged, "I'm begging you, please save my daughter." The people standing there were startled. The boy turned away, thinking, in the end, he still hasn't apologized even once. In the evening, Sarah stood by the window looking up at the sky. The small dog at her feet clung to her dress, letting out a few barks. Another rustling sound was heard, and a black cat appeared out of nowhere before Sarah's eyes. It stood there looking at her and meowed a few times. Sarah exclaimed in surprise, "A black cat?" She looked at it and called out, "Esto, you really are just like him." At first, I thought he was so foolish. He was thin and very quiet. He also didn't seem happy about being able to read people's minds. If it were me, I would love it. I could talk to Haru all day long, and even though he has the adorable Nu by his side, his face is still so empty. But when I saw him, his eyes were so beautiful. My heart felt so at peace seeing those blue eyes. But when I think about him using those eyes to kill someone else out there, I don't know anymore. I can't think of anything. I was truly horrified by what my father and their brother did, but at the same time, I felt relieved. Even though everyone present died, Esto didn't harm my father and brother. I was scared of myself for thinking that. A voice rang out, "That's not your fault. Don't blame yourself for something that isn't." The black cat jumped down and ran to the man who had spoken. The little girl turned around and called out, "Esto," with a look of surprise. He smiled at her and said, "It's been a while, Lady Saralyn." He decisively extended his hand towards Sarah. She was truly stunned for a long moment. In just the blink of an eye, that face broke into a bright smile. "I told you to just call me Sarah. You know. Did you come here after hearing from my father?" He immediately replied, "This has nothing to do with the Viscount. Didn't you also say that last time, my lady?" He shyly and slowly responded, "That we are friends." Sarah's face lit up as she continued, "That's right, secret friends, you still remember." He added, "As your friend, I have no intention of harming you or your family, so I will erase your memories." The girl, who had been listening happily, was left devastated by his words. She asked in a daze, "What?" He patted her head. The boy reassured the young lady, "Don't be afraid, Saralyn, this is necessary for you." She slapped his hand away and said, "What are you talking about?" Esto became pensive again. He hesitated and said, "Otherwise, are you just planning to die?" The little girl looked up at him and spoke of that matter, and seeing her, she hesitated, and he spoke again. "If you forgot everything about me, could you smile happily when you see your family?" The little girl stood frozen. Trembling all over, she lowered her head as if deep in thought. After a moment, Saralyn clenched her fists and spoke up. "What do you mean that's what I need?" She screamed, "Is it better not to know? Is it okay to just ignore the things I don't like? To look the other way? To pretend it didn't happen and forget everything?" She grew even more agitated. "Is that what adults do?" Esto leaned down and said gently, "That's not what I meant." She grabbed his shirt and asked, "Then what do you mean?" "You idiot!" Saralyn's eyes welled up with tears. "I'm afraid I'll forget everything, these feelings, and end up bullying others without realizing I'm hurting them. I'm afraid I'll smile, completely unaware that what I'm doing is wrong." She was reminded of her father, of becoming someone like him. Seeing Haru trot over, she called out and picked him up. She added, "If I forget about you, I'll forget everything about Haru too." Her tears were filled with heartbreak. "I never want that to happen." Seeing her like this, he grew curious. He asked Saralyn, "So what do you want to do?" She remained silent. After a long moment, she suddenly said, "I want to keep going." She looked at him with a radiant expression. "Just being your friend is enough. As for the rest, I'll handle it myself." He asked, a little surprised, "Is that really okay?" She affirmed, "Yes, it is." Her silhouette shone brightly, under the starry sky, smiling brightly. "I'm Saralyn Fabian after all, so don't even think about erasing my memories." She finished speaking, adding a sharp glare for emphasis. Esto replied, "I understand." And with that, their conversation came to an end. Esto turned to leave. "Well, see you." He then climbed onto the windowsill, preparing to depart. She was about to ask something else when he turned back. Looking at her, he asked, "So, you think you can do it?" He smiled gently. "Yeah, if it's you, I'm sure you can." With that said, he leaped down, startling her. She called out his name to see what was happening, but was surprised to see beautiful feathers fluttering down. Delighted, she smiled and watched intently. She stared at his retreating figure and thought, he has so many friends now. The sky, with its moon and stars, grew quiet again. 3 people were walking down the road when Esto suddenly stopped. He turned around and asked, "How did you two know I came to the Fabian mansion?" Parker scratched his head, saying, "Me? Muon just dragged me along, said we were going to find you." Muon shrugged and said, "What do you mean? How did we know?" He recalled that Esto had said, "What I want to do is my own decision." With that, he turned and left, walking up the stairs of the large, quiet mansion. His footsteps echoed clearly. Esto went up the stairs with Muon still following him. He suddenly stopped and called out to Muon. Muon looked bewildered. "Huh?" Esto told him to go on ahead and rest. With that, he walked past Muon, surprising him. To Muon's bewilderment, Esto quickly walked back down the stairs, making Muon sigh. As he followed him down, Muon grumbled, "He's still acting like such a child. How could we not know what he's up to when he acts like that?" Muon came over and put an arm around his shoulder, but we didn't know that young lady was so smitten. Esto immediately denied it. "It's not like that. he thought to himself. I'm just going to stop talking now. A voice called out to Esto from a window above. It was Ahu, who waved and said, "Dinner's just been served." Muon looked up and said, "Oh, I'm getting a little hungry myself." Parker added, "We should eat up since we're leaving tomorrow." Esto thought to himself, "Tomorrow? Tomorrow we head to Spia village." They started buzzing about dinner, which had special beans, meat slices, eggs, and fried rice. Someone else commented, "Isn't that just a basic meal at a guild?" In the middle of the forest, Ahu's voice whined, "I'm so tired. The land here is quite barren," causing Nura to constantly complain, "Ah, I'm in so much pain." Ahu turned back and asked, "Are you very tired?" He reached his hand out towards the cactus. "Let me carry you," with an adorable face. Right after that, the cactus jumped into Ahu's hands, and the group once again continued on their way. Parker took out a handkerchief to wipe his sweat, panting heavily. "This road is so rough, even a carriage would be shaking a lot on this." Mew, walking behind, also chimed in, "I agree. We've come this far, but are we still a long way from the village?" Esto replied, "We still have to go a little further." Mew spoke again, "This village is pretty isolated, which makes sense being this deep in the forest." Esto looked up at the light in the sky, thinking that it was true. He had once lived in a very remote place. Parker said, "In a place like this, you probably wouldn't even get robbed." Mew then said, "How could you get robbed if there's no one here?" He was fanning himself with his wings to create a breeze while asking, "Commander, how long has it been since you've returned to your hometown?" Esto replied, "I just left the village at the beginning of this year." He asked further, "Ah, so you left after your coming-of-age ceremony." Esto seemed to fall into deep thought, his mind filled with memories of things that had happened, of insults being hurled at him. "Get lost, you bastard. It must be true that he's a cursed child." That's right. He stood frozen in place, as if sinking into those dark memories. Esto was startled out of his reverie by Parker, who said, "You must have felt a great sense of responsibility, starting work right after becoming an adult, huh?" Esto turned and asked back, "Responsibility?" Parker smiled and replied, "Yes, leaving the place you grew up in is a very difficult thing, even if it's to pursue a dream or something." That statement made Esto fall into thought again. A moment later, he spoke up. "It's not like that. It wasn't because of so-called responsibility." With that, he turned and walked away, clenching his fists as he thought, "I only left because I wanted to live." Muon and Parker looked at each other, confused. Muon asked, "But didn't you say your family is still in Spia village?" Esto replied nonchalantly, "I guess so." Muon had looked into his family a bit. "Both of your parents are still well, and you're the youngest child with an older brother and sister. They will be very happy to see you come home, right?" However, Esto remained silent. Parker thought, "He's really. Is Esto not happy? Even though he's become a guild commander, he rarely talks about his family, and his expression sours whenever it's brought up. But why? How could they not like a child with such incredible abilities?" Suddenly, he was startled, letting out a "huh?" Then he shouted loudly, "Fire." Immediately, Esto dashed towards the blaze. Parker flew up, "I'll go check it out right away." Mu then asked, "What's all that smoke?" "A forest fire." Parker looked down and replied, "No, that's where the village is." Mu turned and asked him, "What is it? Is the village on fire?" But Esto just replied, "Who knows?" Esto's expression remained completely unchanged as he looked towards the smoke. Muon wondered, how can he be so calm? Ahu panicked. "What should we do? Do you think the villagers are hurt? A fire this big in a village so isolated from the outside world will be very difficult to handle." Mu looked up, "And since we don't have anyone with water-controlling abilities, we're in a difficult situation." Ahu's eyes sparkled, and it asked again, "Water-controlling abilities?" Mu explained further for it, mages can use nearby water, and elemental mages can even create rain. Right after that, Parker returned. He came back to report, "I just went to check." Ahu asked, "So how is it? Is the fire big?" He stammered, "There's nothing like that. It's not a forest fire." They all stood there, stunned. Esto suddenly realized something and said to everyone, "Wait a minute." Esto turned back and asked, "What do you mean right now?" Parker then replied, "Well, so the villagers built a pyre and an altar to burn it. The story was about a cactus. What a frustrating tale. Ugh, I'm so tired, you make talking sound so exhausting." Besser became flustered and said, if I'm not mistaken, on the burning platform there is." Esto urgently asked, "Then what?" Besser continued that there was someone tied up on the burning platform. Esto was standing before the raging fire. Hearing that someone was tied up on the burning platform surprised him quite a bit. Esto was stunned for a moment, as if he couldn't process it, and looked at Para in front of him. He clenched his fists. "You mean the villagers there tied someone up and are burning them?" Para said nervously, "It seems so, and the person tied up appears to still be alive." His words made the atmosphere incredibly heavy. Esto gritted his teeth and thought, "No way, he must be mistaken." Without another word, he immediately turned and ran towards the forest. Para called out in alarm, "Esto!" He rushed forward even faster, his steps hurried, as he crossed through the forest. The villagers wouldn't dare go that far. No matter how evil they are, they wouldn't dare commit such a heinous crime. No matter how evil they are, they wouldn't dare commit such a heinous crime. But if they really are that evil. As he ran, Esto grew more anxious. The first person to be tied up there should have been me. After running like the wind for a while, he saw the village. Esto stopped under a tree, looking towards the fire. On that platform, there truly was a girl tied up. Seeing Biola tied up horrified him. She was crying and screaming, "Please, save me." He recognized her and shouted her name, Biola. Biola cried desperately, insisting, "I'm not like that, please believe me." She called out to Dino and Luis, but they just turned away, pretending not to hear anything. Biola then called for Uncle Jack, but the woman standing next to him yelled, "How dare you call my husband? You, witch?" Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded helplessly, "Please, save me." She remembered a memory from the past, when she was still a child. Her parents had abandoned her and she could only stand behind and watch them. "Play with you. We're busy. Don't bother your parents. Just go play outside." The little girl's eyes filled with tears, "But I want to be with Mom and Dad." Suddenly, a voice said, "Are you Biola? Want to play together?" The little girl turned around in surprise. "Together?" She looked at her new friends. "Yeah, let's play together." The little girl felt like she had found a light in the darkness and quickly ran to them. She recalled the memorable moments with her new friends. "You're so cute. Do you want to be my little sister?" The little girl was so happy, her eyes crinkled into a smile. "Is this what it feels like to be loved? I'm so happy." For the first time, she felt love and care from others. Everyone praised Biola for being truly adorable. "You're getting prettier every day." She wanted to be loved, to hear words of love, "I love you, Biola." She longed to be loved even more, but later on, all she received were curses from the wives. "You and my husband? How dare you?" Biola thought that if she acted that way, she would continue to be loved, but in the end, she only received curses. "That girl is a witch. She seduced you." She was bewildered. "But you said you loved me." She screamed at the top of her lungs, "You said you loved me." But now, she was only surrounded by curses. "Die, burn the witch." The flames grew larger and larger. "It's so hot." Biola could only cry and pray, "I don't want to die like this. Somebody, save me." But hearing her plea, Suki appeared, standing right on the wooden post, and let out a meow. She looked up in confusion. "Is that a cat?" Everyone around gasped. "A black cat. That's a sign of the devil. She's definitely a witch." The black cat looked in her direction and meowed a few times. And as she looked back at it, Bella felt that the cat looked exactly like him. Yes, it was all his fault. If he hadn't left, I wouldn't be in this situation. Instantly, the ropes binding her were severed. The people below were shocked. "What the heck? What did you just do?" Esto jumped down, landing on the platform. He walked over to stand in front of the girl, while Bella was still stunned that Esto had come to save her. Just like that, he picked her up in his arms and carried her out of the fire. An old man stood in front of Esto, and upon seeing the badge on his clothes, he immediately recognized it as the emblem of the Ignis Guild. Esto gently set her down on the ground, then stood protectively in front of her and asked, "What is happening here?" The old man answered resentfully, clenching his jaw, "That girl, she is a sinner. She committed a grave sin that angered the gods, and now she must pay the price for it." He calmly asked, "What did Bella do?" Another woman gritted her teeth. "That wench seduced a man and killed him." Roset, Esto's older sister, approached and said mockingly, "Look at you. Look at the state you're in now that you're back." "So what?" she continued. "The girl you just saved is a murderer." "You know." Bella hurriedly tried to explain. "That's not true." Without letting her explain, the woman shouted, "She's a witch. She seduces the men in the village, kills them, and then eats their livers. They say she loves to eat fresh organs straight from the body. We have to kill her, a disgusting witch." Esto remained indifferent and asked, "Is there any proof? And was this a fair trial?" Roset laughed out loud. "Why would we need to do that?" Someone else chimed in, "Defending a sinner like that? You truly are a cursed child." Yourself, Terios, Esto's older brother, added, "If you were going to leave this place, you should have done so without a trace." "Why did?" he said sarcastically. "Did you crawl back to the village looking so pathetic?" Esto stated firmly, "Bella has never killed anyone." The moment he said this, it made Terios absolutely furious. Esto then explained, "I just read Bella's memories, and there's nothing in them about any of this." She quickly tried to clear her name. "That's right, I'm innocent." But nobody believed them. He's using that strange power of his, so how can we possibly believe him? This was followed by a barrage of curses. "Get out of here, you monster." Going even further, they picked up a fish steak and threw it at his head. This action genuinely terrified the old man, who turned and shouted, "You fool! What stupid thing have you just done?" Suddenly, the sky began to pour, and the rain grew heavier by the second. Esto stood motionless, facing the crowd. Blood from his forehead mixed with the rain, streaming down his face. Bella hurriedly asked, "Esto, your head is bleeding." He seemed dazed for a moment, then laughed loudly. This place hasn't changed one bit. Suddenly, his eyes began to glow, and he commanded, "Stop." Involuntarily, everyone fell to their knees, unable to move a muscle. "Did you just curse us?" Terrio shouted, "You ungrateful bastard. And after we're the ones who raised you?" He suddenly noticed feathers falling from the sky. Mu, who had been watching, could no longer bear it and growled, "That's enough. Do not speak so carelessly to the commander of the Ignis Guild. Where are your manners?" Rosette's face went pale. The famous Ignis Guild? Since the weather is not suitable to receive guests outside, I will escort the members of the Ignis Guild to my home. Everyone else, go home now. The old man began to disperse the crowd. "All right, you can all follow me now." Only then did everyone obey and disperse. Bella, with a sad expression, hesitated. She approached and grabbed his sleeve, tugging it gently as she said, "Thank you for saving me." He coldly said, "I wasn't trying to save you. Don't get the wrong idea." Bella still said, "Even if you say that, I know what you're really like." He turned his face away, saying coldly, "You still owe me, and even now it's as much as when you wished I would be the one to fall into that pit of fire." But Bella shouted, "That's not true." He snatched his hand away. "I'm not so kind as to accept someone who was disgusted by me. After this is over, I hope we never have to see each other again, because you and this entire place just make me tired." Bella, feeling a bit hurt, wanted to explain to him, "Back then, I didn't know anything about you and believed all the slander they said about you. But now I know it's not true." Bella was filled with regret. "I get it now. We're the same. We were both abandoned." Muan spoke up. "What are you doing? Are you going to keep listening to that nonsense?" Hearing that, Esto replied, "No, let's go." She still tried to hold him back. "Esto," she asked again. "We were friends when we were little, right?" She was also about to say, "We." But before she could finish, he retorted, "When were we ever close enough for you to say something like that and just like that?" Esto turned and left with Mubio Lang. Bella collapsed to the ground, filled with regret, screaming and crying in the pet. Rain, wondering why. Inside a house, everyone shouted in unison, "Hooray!" Inside, the white-haired old man spoke with delight. "To think such a wonderful person was born in our village? Ha ha ha." The old man gave an embarrassed laugh and quickly added, "That's right. It's been a while since you've seen your family, so a welcome is in order." His words became more and more awkward, making the atmosphere in the house suddenly fall silent. The old man continued trying to ease the tense mood, adding, Esto has made a name for himself and returned. Isn't that great?" The old man held his hand out at a certain height. "It feels like just the other day he was only this tall." The hairy, bearded man replied, "That's right, haha." A voice suddenly rang out, "I don't think." "That's it." The two men flinched. "Huh." A young man replied, "Our commander didn't come back here because he missed you people." Muan added, "He's here to fulfill a request of mine." The old man's expression soured, looking displeased. "I know you're the one who made the request, but don't interrupt when adults are talking." Muan touched his teacup, then looked up and said, "Such rude words." Muan proceeded to drink his tea as if nothing was wrong and said, "You old geezers all talk the same, don't you?" He then looked up and demanded, "Give me a proper answer." The other two flinched, feeling a bit scared. The old man looked at Muan and asked, "Are you a noble?" He rested his chin on his hand and replied, "Me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bag of gold. He emptied the bag onto the table. "I told you I was the one who made the request." Everyone around them gasped, their eyes wide at the pile of money Muan had poured out. He then flashed a devilish smile and added, "It's all yours." He gestured, scooping up the money and letting it fall through his fingers, adding, "If you answer my question, I'll give you all the money on this table." The old man was stunned by what was happening. The power of money was too great. He immediately welcomed Muan with a warm smile, saying, "Oh my, you should have told us you were a nobleman, sir." An older woman chimed in, "I knew it. You exude such an elegant scent, as if you bathed in honey." Muan ran a hand through his hair, looking cool. "It's not honey. I use perfume." The woman's face lit up with interest as she asked, "Perfume, you say?" He narcissistically caressed his own face and said, "More, I use crick distilled fragrant oil, a gift from the emperor himself, to massage my feet every morning. Since it's a gift, if I don't use it, how rude." A voice piped up, sharp and clear, "Just wonderful." Muan felt annoyed and glanced over. He thought to himself, "I had hoped for something special since this is where Esto grew up, but this place is truly disgusting." The old man stood up with a welcoming smile and said to him, "But sir, I don't know what kind of information simple country folk like us could possibly provide." "For you," Mubi raised his hand, which was holding a bean, toyed with it, and said, "I'm surprised at how foolish you are, and more blind than I thought. If I didn't know you were the commander's family, I would have never guessed by looking at you. It's truly astonishing." "Really," Mubi said as he crushed the bean, then added, "Enough nonsense, let's get to the point." He tossed the crushed bean onto the table and said, At the very least, you fools should be able to answer questions about things you've experienced yourselves, right? He then looked up and asked, "Are you really Commander Esto's family?" Everyone around them glanced over. Beads of sweat formed on the couple's foreheads, then the two of them answered, "Yes, of course, Esto is our son." The woman turned to look at Esto, but he was in a daze, not looking at anyone and just staring off into the distance. The woman went closer and stroked Esto's head, trying to show deep affection for him, as she said, "He is our beloved son." Mubi replied bluntly, "That's not what I want to hear." The woman's face became awkward, and he repeated the question. "I'm asking, is Esto related to you by blood? If you lie, there will be punishment waiting, so speak honestly." The woman continued to stroke Esto's head and added, "Sir, the boy is my son," but Esto's expression remained, completely emotionless. She added, "He looks just like his parents and his sister, so why would you doubt it?" The other two simultaneously looked towards Mubi, who then turned to them and asked, "So were you present when Esto was born?" Terrios answered hesitantly, "I don't remember." The man looked towards his children and spoke up to defend them at that moment. They were too young. Terrios was only 3 at the time, and Rosette was just 1 year older. At that, Mubi crossed his arms, looking skeptical. "Humph. But I remember everything I heard and saw when I was just 1 year old." Para immediately gestured wildly and said to him, "That's because you're special." Lord Mubi. He looked at Esto and asked, "So are they telling the truth?" Esto, bewildered, asked him back, "Why are you asking me?" Mubi looked at Esto again and added, "Because you're the only one who can tell if someone is telling the truth or not." At this moment, Esto looked bewildered and asked again, "I have to check if they're lying?" Esto turned and fixed his gaze on the old man, a man with white hair and a goatee. Esto then turned to look at the woman, who was also looking at Esto. With a worried expression, Esto thought to himself, "I can't." Esto then saw a memory from his childhood. The woman was holding a soup ladle, about to strike him with it. At that time, he could only shield himself, curled up on the ground. The man spoke to Esto, "Listen here." The man lectured him, "Reading other people's memories is a very bad thing." Then, he pointed right at Esto's face and yelled, "You're a monster, doing all sorts of evil things." A frightened Esto backed away, but that's... Before he could finish his sentence, a hand covered the boy's mouth. The couple continued to scold and lecture him, treating him like a monster. The woman even threatened him, asking if he understood. At that moment, Esto's face flushed with fear as he looked at the two of them, the woman threateningly. "You will never read our minds again. If you do," the woman said as she slammed Esto hard against the wall, "you will never be our family again." As a child who didn't understand, he was scolded with such harsh words. Feeling wronged, Esto's eyes welled up with tears as the words, "You will never be our family again," kept ringing in his head. At that moment, his face showed sadness as he thought to himself, "What did I even read back then? I can't remember." Esto immediately closed his eyes, shaking his head repeatedly. "Remember what?" Seeing that the situation didn't look good, Ko spoke up to check on Esto. "Commander, you don't look so good. Are you all right?" At this point, the man also looked at Esto and observed him. Esto quickly tried to reassure them, stammering, "Ah, about that." A cry rang out, startling him. At that moment, down by his feet, Nura and Ahu were approaching Esto with faces full of worry. Esto managed a gentle smile and replied, "I'm fine. I was just thinking a little." Esto turned his head to reassure everyone, "Don't worry." After that, Esto turned to look at the people who were supposedly his parents. It felt as if the two of them were anxious and restless, and Esto thought to himself that they were definitely hiding something. Esto suddenly stood up and walked towards them. He slowly stepped behind them, but the two of them remained sitting as still as statues. Esto placed his hands on their trembling shoulders and said to them, "As per the requester's instructions, you two will let me see your memories for confirmation, all right?" The two were startled, and the woman screamed, "No," while the man remained silent. She yelled, "We already told you, Esto. It's because you do things like that you became a monster. You have no idea how hard we tried to." Annoyed by her shouting, he slammed his hand on the table, causing the table to break in two. Their daughter screamed in fear, and her brother also looked towards him with a frightened gaze. His face now showed clear annoyance as he said, "This monster nonsense again." He was furious now, adding, "You all should shut your mouths." Esto was surprised to hear someone say, "The monster will be sad if it hears that." Nura then crossed her arms, pouted, and added, "That's right. I don't like it." Ka also scratched his head and laughed awkwardly, saying, "Actually, I'm not exactly human like you folks. I'm an avian, a bird person." Ko then chuckled. Hiro, who had been slumped over the table this whole time, suddenly shot up. Ahuo then chimed in, "What's going on? I want in." Everyone there was stunned, staring wide-eyed at the talking cactus. The daughter screamed, "A monster," and then fainted from the shock. Everyone immediately panicked and called out, "Rosette!" Ahu asked in confusion, "Hey, wait, what? Is this thing scary?" Ahu then yelled in anger, "I know you're just pretending to be fainted. Wake up." He even added, "Good grief. There's a talking hairy monkey and a guy with the bloodline of a black dragon and also a talking chicken, but I'm the only scary one. Ko was taken aback, feeling annoyed in his heart at being called a chicken. Awo's face then darkened with anger. It jumped onto Esto's hand, then looked down to see what was happening and saw that Awo was crying. Awo sobbed to Esto, complaining pitifully. "Everyone looks down on me, asterisk, hic asterisk." Esto reassured it, saying, "They don't look down on you, they're just scared. Being able to scare so many people is quite a talent, Awo." Then he patted Awo's head and said, "If you put it that way, then I guess I'm pretty amazing, huh?" Esto didn't reply and just turned to look at them. "If you want to receive the requester's reward, you should cooperate." The brother, Seo, yelled, "Who do you think you're threatening?" Then, he strode aggressively towards Esto. The guy grabbed Esto by the collar and shouted, "You bastard. Damn it. You've been nothing but a burden from the start. We have to live in shame and humiliation because of you. Why do we also get scorned and badmouthed just because of you?" The more he spoke, the angrier he got. "I threw you in the attic so I wouldn't have to see you, you little brat." Esto remained silent, saying nothing. He continued speaking with an arrogant expression. "You know what? That attic wasn't built for living in." He added, "Did you know that in the winter, that place becomes like a freezer, so no one can survive there?" The older man shouted at him, telling Tyrios to stop. At that moment, he was startled when he heard the man say that. But he continued, "We didn't feed you for a whole month, yet you survived like a cockroach." The older man yelled, "I told you to stop," but he wouldn't stop and continued to shout at Esto, "If you can survive even after we sent you to the gates of hell, what are you if not a monster?" The man was horrified to hear his son say such things, and even the woman covered her mouth at his words. Esto, with an indifferent expression, looked at him coldly and said, "So that's how it is." He continued, "I hate you. You're the biggest outcast of all. It's disgusting. You live as if you're one of us by imitating our mother's eye color." When thought to himself, to imitate her eye color, Esto suddenly grabbed his hand tightly and said, "For a very long time now." With a look of annoyance and anger, Esto said, "I hate you too, brother Terios." He gritted his teeth in absolute fury at the boy's unyielding words, and then he threw a powerful punch towards Esto, yelling, "You bastard." The punch flew, but the man, his father, stepped in and blocked his attack. Esto was surprised by what was happening, and the man called out, "Father." The older man remained calm and said, "He is your brother, Terios. I'm not forcing you two to get along." The man with determined eyes looked at his son and said, "But you cannot disown him." He asked, "What?" Terios angrily shouted in his face, "Father, you hate him too. You've always been afraid of him." The man answered honestly, "That's right, I am afraid." The man's whole body was trembling, "But I have never hated him." Esto thought to himself, "If you don't hate me, then why?" Esto quickly placed his hand on the man's back and thought, "Why are you doing this?" Suddenly, Esto's hand emitted a stream of light, and something made Esto utterly surprised. With his mouth agape, Esto thought, "This is the source of the light. It's spreading throughout the room." Esto thought to himself, "This light." Suddenly, everyone in the room disappeared. There was no one left. At that moment, outside in the forest, the sky filled with dark, gloomy clouds. The man was panting heavily, holding an axe with some kind of container on his back, taking step after step up a high mountain. A crow flapped its wings and flew out, startling the man and causing him to fall backward. When the crow flew away, the man slowly got up, muttering, "Damn it." He looked around and cursed, "I've taken the wrong path." A light shining in the distance made the man squint. Squinting his eyes toward the light, he saw a glow shining up through the canopy of trees, appearing right before him. The man immediately ran quickly in that direction, shouting as he ran, "Excuse me, hey over there, help me." The man continued to run, panting, towards that spot. "Please wait for me for a moment, at least stay with me until sunrise." The light gradually grew more dazzling, getting larger and larger, striking the man's eyes and forcing him to cover his face with both hands. When the light subsided, the man slowly opened his eyes to look and couldn't help but exclaim, "My God." Down below in a wide crater, there was a stone, glowing yellow. The man looked at the yellow stone and continued to call on God. Then the man slowly slid down into the pit. He went towards the yellow stone, and as soon as he got down, the man had to exclaim, "Oh." The man thought to himself, "That must be gold." He broke into a joyful smile. "It's gold, a massive, giant chunk of gold." Then the man excitedly said he could take this thing. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed. It turned out to be a wolf with injuries